So I'd like to wish you all a warm welcome to the debate on the future of social policies in the European Union. What are the views of the social third sector and regional actors on the new multi-annual financial framework of the European Union? It is organized together with the Taula d'Entitats del Tercer Sector de Catalunya and the Catalunya Internacional Consortium. We are pleased to see that it's a very timely topic, and we thank you all for being here today. We have a very diverse audience. We have federations that are members of the Taula, we have academicians, private companies, representatives from municipal, regional and national institutions, students, consultants, individuals, guests from abroad, eager to learn about what is happening in Europe. This plurality is something that motivates us to create spaces for reflection and do it from a perspective of alliances under the umbrella of a human rights-based approach. We cannot deal with everything today, of course, but we will be delighted to listen to your opinions and ideas. The event is divided in three parts. First, there will be some opening remarks. Some background on the EU pluriannual financial framework, and thirdly, a deep dive into the opportunities, challenges and reflections behind this long-term negotiations in the times we are living today. We will be talking from a regional perspective, a Catalan perspective, also from networks and territories, without losing sight of how decisions that are taken in Brussels have a direct impact on the everyday lives of the people supported by your entities. So we'll start off the event with the institutional welcome, and I would invite Mr. Xavier Travado Ferrer, the President of the Taula d'Entitats del Tercer Sector Social de Catalunya, to join me up on stage. Thank you so much, Marta, the Regional Minister, Director General of Catalunya Internacional, representatives from Catalan institutions and European institutions, and also to the organizations from Latvia and Portugal who are with us today, dear members of the governing board of the Taula del Tercer Sector, dear friends, dear colleagues, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Catalonia, to Barcelona, to all of you. Firstly, I would like to have some words of recognition in this opening statement. First, to Catalunya Internacional for jointly promoting these very important actions in the framework of our international activities. And with this one, we have 6 events like this. So thank you so much for your collaboration. I'd also like to extend thank you to the Catalan Ministry of Social Inclusion, the City Council of Barcelona that are supporting us when developing these activities. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to those coming from abroad for making the additional effort of being here physically with us in Barcelona. So thank you for making this effort. And of course, I'd like to thank the whole team from the Taula del Tercer Sector for the enormous work that Roger and his team do in organizing its spaces, and Marta Cid, who is the person in charge of international activities, who has been coordinating all of these actions. Today's debate is extremely relevant, as Marta pointed out, and we want to share some thoughts on 2 main areas, we could say, on how the budget stemming from the 2024-2028 pluriannual financial framework will have an impact on how we can implement the European Pillar of Social Rights. The way the budgets are articulated around the European Pillar of Social Rights is extremely relevant, and if we can organize to have some advocacy on how this is organized, it would be welcome. And we also are here to talk about governance. One thing is having a budget, and the other thing is how these budgets come together, who manages the budget, how does it trickle down into the state and the region of Catalonia, and ultimately how can we make the projects funded by European funds more efficient. Both things are equally important. We have the EU Next Generation funds and the projects we've participated in, and I'm sure we all share experiences on whether or not these projects have been effective or not, and what have been the limitations in governing these funds. That is also a topic of interest. And of course, we're also interested in having an overview of our government in relation to these issues, and hearing the views of representatives from other countries like Portugal and Latvia who are with us today, and hearing also the visions from Europe. We were just mentioning while we were waiting for the event to start that we are living in a very complex environment when it comes to international dynamics. We are truly living a very changing environment with an increase in warmongering climate because of the war in the Ukraine and the ongoing genocide in Gaza, which is making us to increase our defense budgets. We have the advance of the far right. It comes from far, but it's also on the doors of Europe, where many states, the far right, play an important role in governments, and therefore they are conditioning state policies. And the issue of migration is a paradigmatic example as to how the far right is conditioning policies in Europe. And then the hate speech, of course, which is also a dynamic that worries us enormously. In fact, this week we are launching a campaign developed by the tercer sector. It's the second time we launched this campaign to tackle hate speech, and we do this campaign on social media to counter these hate messages. It's obvious that this pluriannual financial framework will have a huge impact, and what we would like to do from the third social sector is to build alliances to fight and to have a say in decisions, of course being aware of our limitations. But it's important, I think, that all stakeholders can participate, forging alliances and trying to have a say. And knowing how we can have a say will determine the way in which we can set up our alliances. I'd just like to say that I was lucky enough to listen to the speech of Ms. von der Leyen last Wednesday, September the 10th. She addressed the European Union, and I took some notes that I wanted to share with you very briefly. The speech took more than an hour, but some of the points I thought were significant in terms of what we are talking about today. It's not just any speech, it's of a very relevant person, and it's all going to be very complex, and negotiating budgets will also be relevant. But I thought it was interesting to listen to her. She spent 42 minutes talking about all these issues: European security, tariffs, wars. I mean, that was the hardcore of her speech around the strategy and the independence of Europe in the international context. And it wasn't until after minute 42 when she started to mention social aspects. More specifically, she mentioned the following topics, among others: the need to draft a law on quality employment. Of course, employment and jobs need to grow in quality, so they'll be adopting a law on quality employment. She also mentioned a European strategy against poverty, which is important. She used the word ambitious, but then, curiously enough, and I'll read literally, to help eradicating poverty before 2050. That doesn't seem especially ambitious to me, the timeline, 2050. It seems to me as if she was talking of climate change or even a longer timeline. Anyway, she also talked about a childhood guarantee, which we are especially interested in. We all know that Spain and Catalonia have one of the highest indexes of child poverty in Europe. So if we have resources in this field, I'm sure it will be welcome. And she also talked about the cost of living and how people have difficulties is making ends meet. And there were 3 or 4 surprising points she mentioned. She mentioned the energy costs, and she said there would be a big investment in infrastructures to reduce energy costs. That's okay. She talked a lot about housing. She acknowledged there was a housing crisis throughout Europe. And she also mentioned they would come up with a European plan for affordable housing. And I think this is an extremely relevant area that is connected to all of the strategies of both the Spanish and the Catalan regional governments, which, as we all know, is a very important element in order for people to have a reasonable project for life. She also talked about cars, building small, affordable cars. I found this curious. She included that in the field of social action, and then she also referred to food, that they would try having affordable food, and they would be launching a campaign for European food procurement. Then she talked of misinformation. They wanted to help, she said, the media, independent and local media, which I also think is extremely important. If we do not have robust media that can do their work, then misinformation will spread even quicker. And she talked about migration and said that she has suggested tripling the resources dedicated to managing migration. I quote literally from the borders in the next budget to manage migration effectively and protect our external borders, she said. End of quote. I wouldn't like to say much more on this point, but I would like to add that we hope today's session will help us to share thoughts and to guide our advocacy work. At the end of the day, through today's debates, we want to be able, together with our allies, to have a greater ability of advocacy in these times and having a say in how social policies in Europe are structured. And despite the difficult context we are living in, and we all know this, we truly believe in an open, strong and cohesion Europe, defending human rights and democracy, and a Europe that can improve policies at the service of people. And we hope you find today's session interesting and useful. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Javier. Next, we'll give the floor to Ms. Laura Forastell Lloret, the General Director of the Catalonia International Consortium, for her opening remarks. Welcome. Let's get the height right. Okay, thank you so much, Marta. Honorable Regional Minister for Social Rights and Inclusion, President of the Third Social Sector of Catalonia, dear authorities, attendees, speakers who are with us from Catalonia and from abroad. Good morning, everyone. Bon dia, buenos dias. Labrit, I hope I pronounced that well. It's a great pleasure to be here, or to welcome you here for the 6th consecutive time after this joint work between Catalunya Internacional and the Taula d'Entitats del Tercer Sector. It's a member of the Catalunya International Consortium, and with the Taula since 2020 we have been working year after year in organizing this type of debates, dealing with topics that are of interest, of a social nature, of course, with the goal of putting people and people's concerns at the center of the debate. We always try doing this from a social European perspective in a comparative manner. I'd also like to thank the teams both at the Taula and Catalunya Internacional who have made this event possible year after year. It's always a great success, and it's a pleasure to see such a full room today with people eager to hear about the topics that bring us here today. Last year, after the European Parliament elections, once the new Commission was elected, we thought it was a timely moment to deal with the new social agenda, the European new social agenda. Now, with the political mandate in course, we will be looking at the new pluriannual EU multi-annual financial framework, which will determine the budgets of the European Union and how they have an impact on the social field. So it's clear that it is our framework of reference. Negotiating this new framework started officially last July with the presentation of a first public proposal by the European Commission. As Xavier was saying, the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, last week mentioned several topics. We won't go through them all now, but when she gave her presentation of the EU budgets last July, she mentioned that apparently there's good news, because she mentioned that the new long-term budget would contribute to the protection of European citizens. It would contribute to strengthening the European social model and to make the European industry prosperous. So initially there are good intentions. We'll have to wait and see how they actually land this big headline. Also, the adoption of a new financial framework in the terms set out by the Commission, we think on the one side should bring greater flexibility to the European budget as a whole, so that the European Union can act swiftly in light of unplanned circumstances, which, as we mentioned, in today's very growingly complex situation is more necessary than ever. And we also need to come up with more simple financial strategies so that citizens, corporations, and entities can gain access to funding opportunities. Because what we want, and especially in debates like today's, when we are talking of social needs, what we want is for these funds, this European aid, to reach to the most vulnerable layers of our society, so that these funds are not just reflected in a budget, but they truly get to the end user. We know the adoption of this framework, which of course will have to be negotiated by states, will be strongly conditioned by social, geopolitical, and economic factors of these times. Xavier mentioned this, of course. Wars is the first that comes to mind, and they pose a threat to democracy and international security, but we also have other issues such as aging population, energy, poverty, aging populations, climate emergencies, which are all temporal emergencies, but we know that they are here to stay. So gaining depth in this requires us to think of long-term solutions. So we think the future in managing EU resources should foresee all of these changing situations and must guarantee social protection that is sustainable and that is recognized in the European Pillar of Social Rights and the treaties of the European Union. Also, in the framework of this constant change, the Commission recently presented a report on strategic prospect 2025, establishing 2.0 resilience to give European decisions in the long term a proactive and prospective nature that can anticipate new challenges and create a safe space for citizens and companies. All of this is written on paper, and having it on paper is good, but at least the report identifies fields of action where Europe can strengthen its resilience to be more proactive, transformative, and to step ahead of challenges. And the good news here is that some of the measures include social measures. So initially, it seems we're going in the right direction. For all of these reasons and many more, because of the current situation, we want to hear from experts in their fields who are leading and representing institutions, social entities, some from Catalonia, others from other European countries, and that is why we invited them to be with us today to share their expertise and to see how and to get inspired by them as to how to deal with the new challenges in the light of the multi-annual multi-annual financial framework. So thanks for your attention and thanks for being with us today. We look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you, Laura. So to wrap up these opening remarks, we have Honorable Mónica Martínez Bravo, the Catalan Regional Minister for Social Rights and Inclusion. Welcome. The floor is yours. Good morning to everyone. I brought a folder that is slightly too big for the podium. Good morning. As I was saying, it's a pleasure being here with all of you for these opening remarks, this institutional opening. I would like to express my gratitude to the Taula d'Entitats del Tercer Sector de Catalunya for organizing this debate on the social Europe, which is more timely than ever. And I'd also like to extend my gratitude to speakers and participants, very especially to those coming from far. Welcome to Barcelona, welcome to Catalonia. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Such central and important topics for the future of Europe.
Okay, so as Honorable President Salvador Illa said, Catalonia wants to become heavily engaged in Europe once again. And the reason for this is that we cannot afford to do anything different. We are living historical times where we are at the crossroads for the future of the continent, and I'd even say for the future of the world. The European Union is living tensions and challenges that are not just economic, social, and geopolitical, but also in terms of the values and the model of our society. In light of the reactionary wave that is surging in several countries, it's essential to come up with social and political agreements between pro-European forces and to place at the heart of the continent's soul the social pillar, human rights-based approach and social cohesion approach, which has played a central role in building what Europe is today. And today, more than ever, we must defend this strongly. The European Union is at a decisive moment, and that is why it's so important to have this multi-annual financial framework. Earlier on, we said that we are living times of change. The current political situation, the international context changes every day, and the world changes constantly. And that is why there are very few things that can anchor us in our values and commitments that are so central to the European Union. And one of these is to look in the long term and come up with a multi-annual financial framework that can fund those aspects that cannot depend on daily changes, but that are the actual spinal cord of the European Union. That is why this debate is so important, and that is why it's so important to take the lead and to have a presence in this debate. And today's conference will for sure help us to have a voice and to participate in this reflection. A multi-annual framework with a budget of 2 billion euros, that is 1.26% of the European GDP. Well, it's important amounts to strengthen the pillar of the European Union. These budgets put a focus on global priorities, security, defense, and competitiveness, but they also have space for social policies, and this is a space we should consolidate and reclaim. At least 40% of national and regional plans will have to allocate funds to social spending, and this includes specific goals such as tackling poverty, improving competencies, and the response to the demographic changes, climate change, and affordable housing. We must also highlight that we do not yet have a final agreement, and therefore we need spaces for debate and to have a voice in the European Council and Parliament, which will define the agreement of the multi-annual framework. And from the regional government of Catalonia, we have already made our voice heard. We've had the opportunity to have a say in these negotiations to advance towards a more social and stronger Europe. We want to take an active role in these negotiations, and that is why we've made concrete proposals to the position paper of the Spanish government, to strengthen social policies, and we will continue defending that Catalonia needs a voice of its own when designing collaboration plans, especially in those fields where Catalonia has full competency, like social services, childhood and dependency. We reclaim a formal co-design mechanism with the state and with the European Commission, and will continue to network with other European regional governments to defend this principle and this participation when it comes to defining this framework. Ultimately, we want a financial framework that isn't just a macroeconomic figure, but we want it to be a truly transformative instrument that is able to maintain this social backbone that should rule Europe. And from the Regional Ministry of Social Rights, we have made specific contributions to defend that this financial framework must continue to protect social objectives such as the fight against child poverty and inequality, economic inequalities. We need to strengthen social protection system and social welfare systems. We need a true network to reduce the growing inequalities in our economy. We also highlighted the importance of fighting homelessness with excellent models, with best international practices. We need Europe to continue being the beacon that leads humanitarian management and migration. We have to defend asylum and refuge policies, putting the growing needs that stem from an aging population at the heart, and we need to also strengthen a new care model. We need to stand by our young citizens who also need help to access housing and to gain access to a professional career that can help achieve their goals. And throughout this whole process, thankfully, from the Catalan regional government and the public administrations, we have essential allies, as could be no other way. We have the third social sector, and we would also like to say loud and clear and invite them to help us to co-create this social pillar, also here in Catalonia, but also in Europe. They are a key ally in the process of building the system of social protection. From Catalonia, we'd like to reaffirm our commitment with the goals set out in the European social pillar, and from the Regional Minister of Social Rights and Inclusion, we work every day to land the European social pillar through public policies that will reach our citizens and that will help to transform their lives. We don't only do this on a daily basis, but we reclaim this in today's debate, where we'll have the occasion to take a deep dive. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay throughout the morning, but there is an underlying debate which we have to pay attention to, and that is the way in which competitiveness in the labor market, the competitive of our companies and economic growth, very often is seen as something separate from social policies. And this paradigm, in my opinion, also speaking as an economist, I think is a mistake. We should say loud and clear that when social policies are properly designed, they're not an expense, it's an investment. They're investments because they have a very positive, large impact in getting companies to be more competitive so that we can all have societies that work better. This makes us more creative. It gives us a greater ability to innovate, also thanks to new technologies, and it makes us more productive. We don't just improve competitiveness with more physical infrastructure and more production centers, but also with more people who are able to create, to fight, and to grow professionally. And this should also be built and enriched through social policies. And for all of this to start breaking the the discussion on treating these two aspects independently, we need to advance towards public policies. We need to be convincing with arguments, with data, and with scientific evidence. We have a lot of scientific evidence pointing at what I was mentioning, but we need more of this. And to conclude, I'd just like to repeat the message. We are living historical times. We are at a crossroads for Europe and for the world, and Catalonia must have a voice and raise its voice to strengthen the European social pillar and to defend that we keep up this social pillar and guarantee that it is maintained. Today, more than ever, the European Union must be the beacon shedding light on human rights at the center, as well as putting social justice at the center. And from Catalonia, we will work tirelessly for this to be the case. Thank you so much.
Moltes gràcies.
Thank you, Regional Minister. We will now start our discussion regarding the future of the financial policies in the EU with two keynote speeches that will share with us the context framework. On the one hand, how this pluriannual financial framework is structured, and on the other hand, what's the vision of the Catalan government regarding this approach. With this information later, we'll be able to start drafting the common agenda that we hope will be drafted by the end of this event. So we kindly invite here Mr. Núñez Ferrer, Director of Cohesion and EU Budget at the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions. Thank you.
Okay. Bon dia, amics catalans.
Good morning, dear Catalan friends. I'm going to speak in Spanish, not in Catalan, because well, my grandfather had a pharmacy here, but I was born in Germany, so I'll speak German. No, I'm just kidding. Here you see my PowerPoint, which is in English, so I'll speak in Spanish, but my slides are in English, and they will be translated into Catalan and English. Well, okay. This picture I've chosen it to describe how we region feel with these EU financial policies. So we are like an island surrounded by a dangerous sea. Okay, that's just to make you feel better. Now, I'm the director of the Cohesion and Budget at the CRPM. So the CRPM is an organization dealing with peripheral and maritime regions in the EU. But you see that we have Quebec. We also have some members that come from regions that are really linked to some European regions. So in this case, Quebec with the French regions. As you can see, we cover a lot of places, all the dark blue regions, and we are in the Pacific and also in the Latin America region, so we have these ultra-peripheral regions as our members. We coordinate and we help these regions to work together. We are divided in maritime regions, so we deal with maritime regions. Catalonia is one of the important regions in our organization. That's why I need to make an effort with my Catalan, otherwise it won't be good. But okay, we were founded back in 1973. I was a member already. When I was 3 years old, I was the director already. No, just to say that we were created back a long time ago, and we have a lot of influence in political discussions. So let's dive into the subject. Here you can see the European Pillar of Social Rights of the EU with the main 20 principles stated by the EU. This is a very nice graph. But the question is, where are these principles at the EU political level. That's what I will try and describe in a kind of superficial way because I don't have much time, but I hope I'll be able to share with you what's happening currently. I represent regions, not countries, but regions, 160 in total, more or less. Maybe tomorrow will be one more or one less, but this is a lot of local authorities, a lot of regions. And here what's important is that in all the public expenditure, the social part of this expenditure accounts for 40%. And half of this expenditure is managed by regional entities. So half of these funds for the social sector, meaning education, health, housing, social services, etc., etc. So the regions as entities are very important in order to manage and to maintain these social services. Now, it is very important to be aware of the position of the local and regional authorities and the regions and the German Länder, etc. So it's very important to know what are the competencies and to what extent these competencies are important at the political European and national levels. Here you have another example, the environment. Here, local, international and EU spending, you see that local spending is 83%. It is estimated that the climate expenses, the climate change expenses will be paid by local spendings, but this is not reflected in the discussions and around the new policies. So it's quite surprising to see that in a moment where we are feeling these local impacts, and we are seeing this also in countries that are not members of our organization. So all these health services expenses in a country such as Ukraine are paid by regional organizations. The Ukrainian regions are honorary members of our institutions, and we have all the firefighters, the ambulances, the policies. So all this is managed by regional entities, and their operation is very much linked to the local knowledge, even not knowledge from Kyiv or Brussels. It's local knowledge. So we need to wonder, are we taking this into account? Now, before looking at this map, I'd like to say that in this moment in the European Union, we are seeing a clash amongst social and economic models, and not necessarily politics. I mean, it's not about the right and the left. No. We have kind of a centralization at the political levels, but it's rather the idea to see who's responsible for what, who has the competence for what. And in this moment, there is a kind of centralizing movement at the national and at the European level. The social and territorial cohesion has been a main concern for the EU, actually. And the EU budget with Jacques Delors, he was a Frenchman that was trying to regionalize France because his idea was to remove decentralization in France around Paris. And the regional European policy actually was pushing for the creation of regional autonomies. It was designed to promote the regional autonomies, and it was designed as a budget where the EU budget was aiming at the European citizens rather than central governments. So the funding had to be, or was supposed to be based on funds that were closer to the European citizens rather than national budgets, for example. And the cohesion policy was based on that. But for some years now, this has been changing for several reasons. And one of the questions that we have now, and this is a question that I believe is very important, but it's also very important for people such as Enrico Letta, who wrote the document regarding the future of the single market, and he was talking about the future of the single market. He considered that the regional and territorial cohesion was very important. Who's Mr. Letta? Well, it's the other one next to Draghi, but nobody listens to him. So everything, well, both of them are Italian, and I'm not sure whether they belong to the same party or not. Draghi is the macroeconomist at the central bank, okay? And the other, Mr. Letta, spent his time traveling from region to region, from country to country, from city to city, asking people what they needed. So we have these two visions. One coming from an economist that defends the growth of the regions based on this distributed economy, and he invented the word or the concept regarding the freedom to stay. So van der Leyen says, wow, that's great. She says the right to state rather than freedom to stay. And he says that was later. No, poor him. He was not talking about your right of getting a social fund to stay in a place with no job, but they pay you to stay. That's right. And the other thing is having opportunities, and that's freedom. Freedom is about opportunities, and the right is, yes, they help you stay, but maybe they are not giving you any opportunities, and that's a very different thing. What is the role then of the economy? Well, its role is to manage society, or maybe increasing the GDP numbers. I was reading about that the other day. The Americans are growing, yes, but we are weak in Europe. And I say, yes, but look at what they have. In the US, their life expectancy is the lowest amongst the OECD countries, and they have the highest birth mortality and children mortality. So having a good economy is useless then. So we need to know what model do we want to have in the EU to manage our society and our social system. We need to make decisions. And the problem of the European Union now is that we don't have that. We don't know how to do that. And for the Lion doesn't have it neither. And what do we do with the economy? Well, is it the social model that we need? That's what people say. We need to compete with China. So if my social model is competing with China, I will not like it. It's not good. I'm hoping they will give me another idea about how we can improve as a society. So we are lacking a model. And Enrico Letta was trying to present this model, and other economists with him. They are spatial economists. They look at the territory instead of looking at the countries as a measure or as an indicator. The European Union continues to measure the future of the economy in Europe at a national level, and they are comparing Luxembourg with Spain when it's not the same. You cannot use national figures when all the countries in Europe have different sizes. And when you have a regional vision, your vision is much better. You understand much better what happens. So let's take a look here a little bit at these regions before talking about the budget. And here I'm sharing what happens in Europe at the regional level. What we see here, everything that you see here that's not in dark blue, are the regions that have decreased or that are stuck. Comparing from 2015-2017, comparing this with 21-23, we see that all the regions, almost all the western regions, most of them, this is a huge territory, 100 and I don't know how many millions of Europeans living in these regions, well, they are declining. Many of these regions, interestingly, I'm going to show this map now, and surprisingly, if we take a look at the regional competitiveness index, because some of these regions have very high competitiveness index. What does this mean? First, this means that the index is telling us nothing. It's useless, absolutely useless. And the other thing that it's telling us is that there is a fundamental change, meaning there is a industrial revolution change, but also a paradigm change. But we also have another change regarding the lack of single market, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, a lot of regulations that are not correct. So we do not have an economy enabling people to become entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter their size, because everyone is protesting because we have a system that is not good for businesses. And we see this because we have apparently this positive index, but in this same space where everything is good, well, if you take a look in these last 20 years, things aren't good at all. And we need to ask ourselves why. And it is not, the solution will not be the EU budget, because the EU budget is really small. I'll let you know later. The budget for the Commission is 0.3 of the GDP. And this is a catalyzing investment, and it's not going to cover all the problems. So when I hear Mrs. von der Leyen making promises and commitments and saying we will build houses, etc., this is not the goal of the EU budget. The goal is not building houses, but the main goal of the EU budget is to push so that we have a regulatory model and system at the European and at the national levels, and also at the regional level, because we need to try and have an atmosphere enabling the creation of jobs, of the opportunities, and that's different. We cannot invest all the money that we want in this EU budget without changing basic things. Then you can see here the risk of poverty in the EU, very high in some places, and obviously there are some southern areas that are really impacted by climate change, and I don't see that these things are taken into account. Now, the demographic change, some of these maps belong to us, others belong to the Committee of Regions, because in my organization I try to create our maps because we do not trust the Commission. But here we have this map regarding the demographic change, regarding the future. So this is considering that things won't change in the next years, so until the year 2100. So this is just to set the trend, so to say. And we see problems in many areas of the EU. And then we say, what's the problem? The problem is that there is a problem with the single market. The capital markets unions, what does this mean? The capital markets in Europe is completely fragmented. And the Commission says we need to make sure that people invest their savings in European companies. And I say, no, that's not how economy works. The big investors in Europe, they invest outside Europe. But it's not because they want to. It's because here the economic situation and the atmosphere for businesses is not good, and you cannot grow as a company. And European companies are leaving because they cannot grow in Europe. So they go to the US and they try to find money somewhere else, because our market capital is not complete. We do not have a European company registration. we don't have European businesses, and we want unicorns. That's how they call it. I thought that was something for children. So we have these unicorns, these big companies, to compete with American companies, but then we do not have the right situation. So we say, let's do a regulation obliging people to invest in companies that will not work, and that's not the way we need to do things. So economy works when you give opportunities, freedoms, not rights or obligations. So we need to give this freedom to act, to create businesses, to succeed with these regulations that help keep our society in a stable situation. But that's not the main vision. That's a problem. And in my opinion, the budget direction is not the right direction, and the centralization that we are seeing at the European level to decide about the future is not working at all. And it's not by surprise that the famous fund of just transition that was created to help the regions that had to adapt to the energy changes, these funds were not properly used because they were given to central governments with European rules, so that they were used at the local level in the wrong way. So it did not work. So this type of funds are better managed by local and regional entities. Some of these local and regional entities are not good, of course. In all countries we have thieves. That's not why we put everyone in jail. Okay, there are bad regions, there are corrupt regions, there are regions that are not working well, so let's help them improve. But this is not by centralizing everything at the European level and the national level. This is not what will help us improve the impact at the local and regional level. So it has been proven. Even the European Investment Bank has reached the conclusion that the investments that they do, when they do them through local entities, work better than when they are done through national entities. So they say it themselves. And so that was before Nadia Calviño was there. That's not her fault, okay? So, but what's the answer of the Commission that feels desperate to do something? Well, the response is centralization, these huge funds, the huge competitiveness fund, and at the end of the day, these are the same funds, but they are given another name. The same level of European investments, 1.26, they say it's high. So out of this 126 we have 0.11 to pay the Next Generation EU fund back. And I can tell you that the pluriannual financial framework of the EU from 1993 through to the year 2000 was 1.24. It was higher than any other financial frameworks because there was a group of countries saying no, 1%, 1%, 1%. Then the EU has many other competencies, some of them by the treaty, they are legal, but others thanks to some pressures, because the EU citizens expect things from the EU. We were promised that. I am super pro-Europe. They said, yes, it's going to be amazing. We will have an indestructible single currency. The borders, the international trade will be controlled by us because we are big. And I believed in that. And now I'm saying, okay, all these promises, where are they? And if I am saying this, let's imagine what other people are also thinking. And sometimes we don't realize, or they don't realize that this is so in Brussels. So we need to link the EU budget to the citizens. The social rights and the cohesion rights need to be guaranteed, even if they are not so trendy as of now. And before getting into the budget details, it doesn't work. Oh. No, yes. Yes, you need to point there. Okay. So another thing, a study was made. Some people were asked questions without them realizing why, okay? And then they tried to see the trust in politicians. We see that The lowest is the national government's level, then the EU, and then they saw that citizens trust the most the regional and local authorities. And when you see the Commission level, the trust is the opposite. So there, they trust most the EU than the national level, and then they don't trust the regions. So it's the other way around in the Commission. And here you see two graphics, because I like to draw and I post my drawings in LinkedIn. So here, two things. First, the funds that go to the regions, they are allocated to missions. For example, housing, this much here, this much there, housing, defense, and at the end of the day, their strategy is to say, okay, 10% for this and 10% for that, without taking into account the needs of each region. So that's the idea now. 20% for digital things. And in some countries, the digital services work marvelously, but they need to invest 20%. They would rather need this 20% for other things, but no, they need to allocate it to the digital services. So these missions are decided from Brussels. The rearming, the reinvestment, everything is managed like this by missions. And then we have the EU budget, which is always the same, very small, and they are all eating from the same budget at this table, meaning science, agriculture, the regional policies, and all of a sudden this soldier comes and say, can I join you? With the same budget, because at the end of the day, we have all this military part now, even if we don't have this competence at the EU level. So we are now going to fund even military companies with the same funds, but the budget now, what van der Leyen presented, she presented that, and I can assure you that now many member states are there with their scissors trying to cut. And we need to realize that we have here a problem. We have too many competencies, too many micromanagement from Brussels, and we have a budget that is not enough. That's the Commission proposal. They are presenting the financial frameworks from 27 until here, and now they're saying, look at this, 1.05, and now we're going to go to 1.15. And 11 points will be used to pay the lended money back. So they included this, and this 1.15 also includes the climate fund that will start in 2026 until 2032, so that this amount is bigger, but it's outside the multi-annual budget. So legally, this shouldn't be included, but it is included so that it can look bigger. And what I do, and I come here, I say to the Commission, well, okay, but from 1993 to the year 2000, we had 1.25 of GDP, or 1.24 of the new GNI. That's what we use now. So it's almost the same thing as 30 years ago, actually. And now you tell me that this is a revolution, a very big revolution in euros, because the inflation we had is huge. That's why it looks like this is huge. But actually, it's not. Then another proposal from the Commission. 7, that's the big revolution. Instead of 7 titles, they are now giving 4, proposing 4. And so they put all that's national there. Everything that's managed from the local and national level, they put it here. And then they also include, and I think this is really a joke, the giving back, the paying back this money And it looks like the volume is bigger, because it's 169 billion euros that they put here. So it looks like they're giving us more money, but it's not true, because they shouldn't have included that here. Maybe they should have include this in the administration bucket. So they include this there. So to me, the repayment of Next Generation EU, they put it there, and to me this is unacceptable. Then they also included everything that, so under the word competitiveness, well, actually they are using the same word that we had in the previous financial framework, but it was not 20, so they erased it, and now they put it again back again because it's 20. So I don't know, it's the same names, Horizon, etc. Yes, 1 minute, sorry. Now, very quickly, my final slides. This was done by someone from Turkey. So now we have all the budget. Then there is the national part. We have the national, the regional part, the agriculture, the payments to agriculture, to farmers, etc. And they've also included the climate fund that should be outside the budget, but they put it inside because, like this, it looks like there is more money. Then the repayment, and that's the national part. So they put all this together, and then what we've done in our analysis is to say, in the national bucket, because von der Leyen comes and say, yes, the regions were at the center. Yes, at the center of her target, the target that she has in her office, but that was not real. Now the plan is different. Now they're planning to give central governments the money so that they can do whatever they want with this money. If they want to give this money to regions, they can, and if not, they also can. So they say, no, we will guarantee this money for the poorest, but not the distribution. So we don't know who's going to receive more or less. So if you are at 30% of the European average or at 74, well, we don't know who's going to get more money. So what she wants is competitiveness, and also competition amongst all the regions. Now they are divided between the less developed regions and then the more developed regions. They should compete amongst them. And then they say that the poor regions should also compete for the investment funds for the innovation. They should compete also. And what we know is that when they guarantee these funds to the poorest because they cannot compete. They cannot compete with the more advanced. So what we have here is a policy to promote the centralization of funds around those that succeed the most. But we are talking about social policies here. We are talking about social cohesion funds at 0.3% of the GDP, and this 0.3% will not change the competitiveness at the EU level, but it's going to destroy the cohesion policy. But it's not revolutionary. It's not enough as a fund. It's simply, well, a little bit more. Because then we also have funds that aren't allocated to countries, and they are going to go to the richest regions, and everything will be given to the richest regions. And what we have in the EU is that only 10% of the European regions are dynamic regions. And out of them, we have some very poor regions that grow fast, but we have very few rich and dynamic regions, actually less than Asia. We have less territory than Asia, less territory than the US. But we behave as if we could afford this. And this is a problem of statistics and of politics. That's why I like data and I like maps, because that's how we should regain this discussion around the territorial distribution of businesses and of funds. And that's my last slide. We realized that the cohesion funds, the agricultural funds, etc., well, the intensity per inhabitant of these funds generally is lower in the poorest regions than in the richest, according to the Commission's formula. So the guaranteed funds for the poor regions are lower than the other regions in the cohesion funds. And this is without taking into account the direct payments to for the agriculture. That's all the rest. So the more favored regions will get more funds to improve their cohesion, actually. And that's a design problem. But since the legislation lacks so much details, our job will be to go backwards and trying to strike a balance. And finally, my last question is, where are the 20 principles of the European Pillar of Social Rights in this budget? Well, it is a good question. Indeed. Where are they? I'm not able to answer it now yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Núñez. We will next continue with our debate, and after listening to Mr. Núñez's speech, we'll try rescuing some of the things he mentioned to see what we can do in light of this scenario that he painted for us. It's necessary to look at things this way and to be aware of what's happening. So, next I'll give the floor to Ms. Conchita Ponce Escudé, General Director from the General Directorate for EU Affairs. We'd like to excuse the presence of Agustí Fernández de Lozada, who wasn't able to be here for other commitments. So, thank you for being with us, Conchita, and welcome. Very good morning to you all. Jorge, you've made it really difficult for me. Thank you, firstly, to the Taula de Entitats del Tercer Sector, with whom I am delighted to be today, stepping in for Agustí Fernández de Lozada, who, as you rightly said, wasn't able to make it here today. But this gives me the opportunity to be with you, and I'm very pleased to continue working and collaborating with the Taula de Entitats. And of course, I'd also like to thank Catalunya Internacional for facilitating this really interesting working session that is connecting the proposal for the EU multi-annual financial framework for the period 2028-2034, and it puts it in connection, as I was saying, with the EU social policy and the social policies here on our continent and at home in Catalonia. After listening to what Jorge had to say, I would say that despite everything, the European Union is the solution. It's our home. It's the space where we live and where we enjoy our social rights. So even if there's always room for improvements, and of course this debate is to look at how we can have an impact on the EU multi-annual financial framework. As I say, the EU is our home, and we need to look at how we can work with the EU. So what are we talking about here? Well, we are talking about the new EU budget in the long term. We're talking of the EU draft budget in the long term. And as you know, the European budget is a economic transfer of European policies. So if we are talking in EU terms, we have European policies and how they are funded. And how are these European policies funded? Well, they are funded through a long-term budgetary planning done by the EU institutions. The Commission makes the proposals, that's its task, and that is what they did last July. They made a proposal with a whole series of communications and proposed regulations for each and every one of the funding programs that are foreseen under the European budget, that is the EU multi-annual financial framework in technical terms. So we are talking of a long-term proposal that is open, up for discussion. And discussions like the ones we are holding here today should help to see or look into this long-term EU budgetary proposal to look at how, on a social level, and how from the Taula de Entitats Socials del Tercer Sector de Catalunya, how we can have a say in this and how, together with the governments and the support of the social third sector in Catalonia, how can we have an impact and to try changing anything we do not agree with in this proposal. So it's an open topic. It's something that is under negotiation. The European Commission just before the summer break made a proposal. These proposals were made not just in terms of communication, but also in terms of regulations. It must be first read, and we must read them carefully, because I would recommend that you read the proposal, that you don't just go by what you hear, but that you actually read the proposed regulations, because they will be the basis to do advocacy work, not just with the European Commission, which has done a part of its job, but also to do advocacy work with the European Parliament, with our representatives, our MEPs who are representing our citizens, and to do advocacy also with the EU member states when they meet in the EU Council and the Council of the European Union and the EU Council, who must approve the European Union's financial framework. Then this financial framework will be broken down into each of the proposed regulations that shall regulate the European Cohesion Fund, the European Social Fund, this new mechanisms of regional and national plans. They will also regulate the Erasmus Plus program, which has a very important social impact, especially on our youth. And unless we make a change, the Erasmus Plus program will be joined with the European Solidarity Program, which for the entities here in Catalonia is quite important. So this is a program that continues, but it will continue unless anything changes under the umbrella of Erasmus Plus program. And I would also strongly encourage you to take a careful read of the new Agora program. It's a new word that aims at bringing together a funding program, which I'm sure you're well aware of in the third sector, which is citizen equalities, rights and values. It's a funding program which covers, right now, although with a budget of its own, it covers everything having to do with fighting inequalities, fighting discrimination and others. So it's a social program per essence, and in the new proposal, the new budgetary proposal, this program would be placed under another umbrella, that is the Agora program, which also includes cultural programs and programs to support the audiovisual. At the end of the day, When we look at it's a whole set of words, but what we need to really study is that the proposed regulations, the small print or the big print of the proposed regulation, to see whether besides these shifts, the programs are used to continue funding what we are interested in seeing funded. So I'd strongly encourage you to read the proposed regulations, especially those that have a more social dimension that you're more interested in, and read the small print and big print. And after this reading, we can then move on to doing advocacy. We're living in times when we need to do advocacy work, and we have a 2-year time frame. Normally, the budget, even if the debates will continue during these 2 years, since the submission of the Commission's proposal, then the negotiations, the machinery gets in motion, and we'll reach the year 2027, at the end of 2027 in theory, when there'll be a big rush to adopt all these new regulations, to try that by January the 1st, 2028, everything's approved and can be implemented. Jorge already explained the key elements behind the proposal. These almost 2 billion euros of investments over the 7-year timeline, which also include reimbursements of debt generated by the Next Generation EU funds. As you know, Next Generation funds were invented somehow as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. I remember we were working in the negotiation of the 2021-2027 financial framework, and then suddenly COVID appeared and the European Commission was forced to balance things out. And I think the criteria they followed was good, to make funds available from the European Union and the states to come up with these next generations. Apparently, the next generation funds will not continue for the 2028-2034 period. But the debt is still there, the duty contracted by the European Union to repay these funds. So we will have to work, unless we all change the rules of the game. We will have to manage a much lower budget than the one we have now, where we are combining the 2021-2027 framework with the Next Generation budget, which will soon come to an end. So we will have to go back in time, and we will have to work with the ordinary budget, which is the one envisaged by the EU multi-annual financial framework. The European Commission has also tried, or at least this is what they say when they presented the proposal, they said they were trying to simplify. That is, they were trying to simplify, although fitting some programs under the umbrella of others and shrinking the number of programs, I don't know whether it'll help simplifying things. We'll have to see the concrete rules of the game. But in any case, one of the mottos behind this is simplification and also adaptation and flexibility. Adaptation and flexibility to the geopolitical circumstances we are met with, we are experiencing, and also that before it was much easier to foresee what might happen, and from the European Union they could help in what was happening. Right now, it's much more difficult to foresee events in the future. It's not something we can give for granted. The world is changing very rapidly, and therefore the EU budget, according to the European Commission, must adapt to these changes. One of the elements that Jorge and the regional minister mentioned, as well as the chair of the Taula del Tercer Sector is governance, and governance is essential. We must all bear governance in mind. We're talking of architecture, the architecture of European funds. Why do I say governance is essential? Well, because all entities, all of you who are here with us, who would like to see what are the opportunities presented by the EU budget proposal, and well, you need to know who's managing what. It's essential, right? We can talk of billions of euros, we can talk of many different programs, but it is essential to know whether the ERCP will be managed by Catalonia or Spain or the European Commission. And then whether you are required to have partners in other countries or not, or whether these European funds are similar to Next Generation, where the state or the regional government can put out calls without requiring partnerships with other countries or not. So, governance, architecture is something we must know. In 2028, but also today. And in terms of governance, the new proposal by the European Commission brings in an important change, or a proposed change that is important in what they call the national and regional association plans. These national and regional association plans share a similarity with the Recovery, Transformation and Resilience Plan, as we called it in Spain. The European Commission somehow has intended to centralize and find a direct interlocution with states. And where before we had operative programs for the social funds, and we had as many operational plans as regions. Well, now with this new governance structure, this new proposal, they've changed this. The Commission is now proposing having one plan per member state, and this plan per member state must bring together the goals and the management of the European Social Fund, the Recovery Fund, aid to agriculture and fisheries, and everything related to migration and borders. So, we will, I'm just giving this as a reminder. It's a proposal. Things may change. But in any case, what the European Commission is proposing is a plan for each member state where under this plan they bring or make explicit how they want to put into practice the goals set out in the European Social Fund Plus, the aids to agriculture and fisheries, and issues related to migration. We must have present and in the proposed the rules for the impression says at least 14% of the allocation of this plan must be dedicated to social issues, including also, of course, as my former speaker said, this must include social housing, which is an aspect that is contemplated in the proposed regulation for these national and regional partnership programs. Of course, for the Catalan government, this is an essential element because we come from the lessons of Next Generation, and in these national and regional partnership plans, all stakeholders are at the same level. In terms of the commitment taken on by everyone to be together when defining and executing these plans. So Jorge was rightly telling us that the closer we get to the needs and to what we want to do, the better place will be to find answers. So from the regional government of Catalonia, this is a space where we'd like to have a say. And as the regional minister said, the Catalan government has a position for the 2028-2034 European multi-annual financial framework with all of the contributions of the regional ministries, and you have access to that document through the website of our regional ministry, and you can read this perfectly well. And long before the Commission made their proposal, we already mentioned the issues that we were interested in seeing. The first, as I said before, is that we reaffirm our commitment towards the European project, and we say loud and clear that the European Union must be part of this solution to our big challenges today. One of the spaces, or one of the essential matters that we conveyed to the European Commission, and where we'll be doing advocacy work through our representatives in the European Parliament, the EU Council, through the Spanish state, or through the Committee of the Regions, or through territorial cooperation networks like the CPMR, where the Catalan government is active. And I'd like to say that in November, next November, we will be hosting the General Assembly of the CPMR here in Catalonia, and our regional ministry is deep in preparing this. So after that, through the different stakeholders, we are trying to have a say so that the European budget is as ambitious as possible to deal with challenges that are paramount and which we must deal with from the European Union. We know that the EU budget is limited, but the challenges we are faced with are great. And many of these challenges cannot only be dealt with from regional or national governments. We need to have a strong contribution from supranational entities. So besides having an ambitious European budget, of course, that we will always defend that regions must be at the heart of this budget for the reasons I mentioned before. The closer we are to the needs and challenges of our citizens, the better we will know how to find solutions to these challenges. And of course, we need a budget where regional and local governments can participate in the design, implementation, and execution of the budget, not just in managing the budget, but also in the designing stages of this budget, so that we can bring in the local and regional perspectives on needs. And when determining these needs, we strongly rely on entities that are even closer to the ground and to these needs. As the regional minister said, the budget must make compatible competitiveness and cohesion, as she said at the end of her presentation, and I fully agree with her. Competitiveness and cohesion are closely interlinked, and they cannot be dealt separately. We need a European budget that is rational and efficient. The status quo, as Jorge was saying, doesn't work. We know that it needs to be flexible, it needs to be adaptable. We have to try to make it rational and effective, and the budget proposal must be simple. The management of this budget needs to be made as simple as possible, because otherwise we'll be dedicating all our efforts in bureaucracy and submitting documents rather than dealing with what we truly want to deal with. And then, of course, the social cohesion, economic and territorial policy is an important component in the European budget, and it must be preserved because it must be preserved, and it needs to be worked on to strengthen social and housing policies that take into account the needs of our youth, that take into account the needs, or that cover the measures in the current program on citizen values, which have a very strong social component besides the European Social Fund, and also it contributes to the internationalization of our companies, and this one does require establishing partnerships with the European partners. We need a budget that gives continuity to social and economic integration of new arrivals here in Catalonia. We need this budget to improve funding for housing and social housing. This is a problem or challenge that the European Commission has taken on board, and I'm sure this will be an essential point in these national and regional partnership plans, because the proposed regulations to include this. I will wrap up. I see we're short for time, but as you know, from the Regional Ministry for the European Union and Foreign Action, for many years now, we have been contributing not just to make the European funding opportunities known through a specific website on European funds that you will find embedded in the website of the Regional Ministry, through a weekly newsletter that I would encourage you to subscribe to if you're not subscribed, because every week you will find information not just on the proposals of the European Commission. We're all working together to improve the reforms that we want to see, but also in funding opportunities that are available. There are many funding opportunities available, and I wouldn't want you to think they're inaccessible. We have awards like the ones you know and that some of you have participated in, have a huge impact. Therefore, I would encourage you to take a look at these funding opportunities. That's for what we have already. And looking ahead into the future, from the Regional Ministry for the European Union and Foreign Action, we will be paying close attention to the proposals. We are promoting advocacy activities through our channels. We also encourage a direct participation in the Committee of the Regions, advocacy activities through our cooperation networks such as the PMR, CPMR, or the Four Engines of Europe, or the work with other partner regions we collaborate with, European regions that is. And of course we are totally available to better understand your needs, the needs from the Catalan social third sector, to include them in our documents and to do advocacy for them. And when it comes to what you may do from the social third sector, through the European Economic and Social Council, which is the entity that also represents your interests, through the MEPs and others. I'll leave it at that. I hope I didn't go over time, and I'm here for anything you need, now and always. Thank you, and have a good day.
Moltes gràcies.
Thank you so much, Ms. Conchita Font. Your presentation was very explanatory. And now, with what Mr. Núñez was saying and with what you said, we now have the basics to move on in today's debate. Let's continue and move on to the first of our two roundtables. This one will be focusing on exploring political advocacy alliances, on how to reach the Commission, on how to try changing these proposals, looking at the tools we have available for this advocacy work. Also looking at how we include a human rights-based approach in the actions we promote from the third social sector with the network of partnerships that we have been building over many years now and will continue to do so. The title is Deploying the European Pillar of Social Rights in the Framework of the Structural Transformation of Social Services. We have Mr. Alonso Lara Montero, Executive Director of the European Social Networks, Ana Montaner-Roquet, the Technician for EU Affairs and Policies in the Catalan Regional Delegation to the EU, and Barbara Díaz-Sanz, Coordinator of the Red Cross in Catalonia. And the panel will be moderated by Xenia Carné-Ureña, Coordinator of the Area of Social Policies in the Taula d'Entitats del Tercer Sector. If you'd like to please come up and join me on stage.
So, as usually, we will try and be as brief as possible because we don't have much time. As it has been said, this panel aims at discussing around the challenges and the advocacy possibilities that we have in Catalonia and in the third sector to have a word and a voice in this uncertain Europe. Now it looks like they are changing their budget priorities. And to discuss about that, we have three experts with us. Ana Montaner-Roquet, she is the officer, EU Policy and Affairs Officers at the delegation of the Government of Catalonia to the EU. Alfonso Lara Montero, the Chief Executive of the European Social Network. Welcome and thanks for being with us, Alfonso. And then we have Barbara Díaz-Sanz. She is the Regional Coordinator at Red Cross in Catalonia. She is an expert in human rights and in humanitarian international law. Thank you all for being here. So during this panel, we'll be speaking Spanish and Catalan so that we can facilitate your participation. So if you need to stop and to clarify something, there's no problem, okay? Now, to start this panel, I would like to know, how do you see this Europe that is changing, that has new challenges? What's your opinion? Anna, we've seen the challenges of this new financial framework with these budget changes and also the challenges linked to the investments in the social policies. We'd like to know, in front of this uncertainty, do we see some light? Do we have some opportunities? Do we have a potential influence? I mean, can we have a word? What can we do to contribute to this new Europe? Okay, thank you. Good morning. Yes. As Xenia said, I am responsible of the social policy follow-up in Brussels, and I'm also in charge of the institutional follow-up of the Economic and Social Committee, which is actually your committee, because the Committee of the Regions deals with other things, so the Economic and Social Committee is your natural representation organization, so to say. So I'm also in charge of the collaboration with the Taula of the third sector, with the Catalan Department for Foreign Action, to support the internationalization of the third sector. And we are also there to help you identify the opportunities that exist, as Xenia said. And in this context that has been outlined before, this complex context, which is not easy at all, with different priorities at the EU, with also the geopolitical concerns, the different political parties at the Parliament. Well, this is a complex scenario to deploy ambitious social policies. So we know that this is complex, it's not easy. But what I want to share with you is something very practical. What can you do as third sector entities to defend your interests? Meaning that all of you are working in specific fields. Your associations, your entities work in different fields. So how can you share your perspectives about these issues, and how can you have your say in this social pillar and this social plan that will deploy this? We know that this action plan will include different initiatives. Some of them have been mentioned already. For example, the strategy to fight against poverty, amongst other legislative initiatives. So now my role here is to show you where you can act as an entity. Because you need to see yourselves as actors in the definition of these European policies. Because in all that I am going to share with you, you can have your voice, you can have your say, you can contribute to the definition of these policies. As it has been said already, you can do this individually, as an entity. As an entity, you'll be able to contribute individually. But of course, if you do this in a network with the Taula or with the other regional institutions such as the European Social Network or the CRPM or other networks that you might be aware of in other countries. Of course, if you do this in European networks and with European partners, your impact will be larger because you will be a bigger representativity, and so you'll have more legitimacy if you do this with other entities that also work at the European level as you. And so you will be able to represent a larger territory. Here you have this simplified diagram regarding the legislative procedure at the EU level. But here you can see all the steps where you can have your say. For example, if you work in the field of poverty, you can convey your messages through these channels. So you can have your advocacy activities. For example, if you want to contribute to this future action plan. In this scheme, in these graphics, You also see that the Commission, the EU Commission, has this legislative initiative. So regarding the European Pillar of Social Rights, the Commission will present an action plan, a new action plan, by the end of this year. And they will do that for all the proposals. So in all the cases, the Commission will draft the initial texts, the initial initiatives, and then the legislative processes will start. But before the proposal, you already have a channel to act. You need to know that this plan will be presented by the end of the year by the Commission, but last year, for example, the public consultation period ended. And this is something that the Commission does with all their proposals when they will present the strategy on poverty or on housing. We know that they will present this because they announce it in their working plan, or the President of the, in her speech, the State of the Union speech, talked about that. So before these proposals, all entities, as your entities, may present their perspectives during these public consultations published by the European Commission. You can do this individually with other entities. It's very easy to do. It's online, so you can go there and you can contribute already, and you can say, I want that the action plan of the pillar that you will present by the end of the year include this or that. And this is a way for you to answer to some of the questions considered by the Commission. Then you also need to know that you can always knock at the door of the European Commission. You can find the person that is in charge of a field, of a thing, and you can say, we are an association representing all the entities working in this field at the European level, and you can say, we want a meeting with you because we want to share with you our perspectives, because we are concerned about this or about that. Of course, maybe it will be difficult for you to get these meetings, but normally they are quite open. So you can send your requests for meetings to these people. And this is another way for you to convey your message. With the Taula and with the European Social Network, with the Taula, for example, we organize every 2 years a mission to Brussels. Maybe you've taken part in one of them. And in these visits, for example, the last one was about the role of the civil society, or also we intervened in the social plan. So we go there and we talk to the Commission members and we say, look, we have the third sector Catalan entities here, and we want to share with you our perspective for the future action plan. Here you see that we have these two other entities, being the Parliament and the Council. They are the co-deciders, because once we have this document, the action plan of the pillar, this document later, the Parliament and the Council will be commented by these two organizations. So the European Parliament, for example, regarding the action plan of the pillar, there will be a parliamentary commission that will meet. They will discuss the document presented by the European Commission regarding the action plan of the pillar, and then there will be an MP that will do a report that will be then discussed in the plenary session. So here you have another intervention field. You need to identify the rapporteur of this report regarding the action plan of the pillar. But, this is applicable to any initiative presented by the Commission to deploy the pillar. So you should identify the MP the member of the parliament that will draft the report regarding the action plan, or you can also identify other MPEs that belong to a political party that is really close to your ideas, and you can go and tell them we want to send these amendments to the proposal. So these are things that maybe you see that are far away from here, but these are real possibilities that you have. When the Parliament will adopt this report, they will negotiate things, and then the Council, in parallel, they do the same thing. The social affairs ministers meet, they negotiate at the member state level, and at the end of the day they reach a negotiating position. And so when they all have their negotiating position, there is a negotiation between the Parliament, the Council, and also with the Commission, and when they reach an agreement, that's the final text that is later published at the doorway, and that will become the action plan. This is really simplified, a simplified description. Then you see on the top of the slide two other organizations that also take part in this. The Committee of the Regions, with the representation of the local and regional entities. These are advisory bodies, so they also publish their opinions, and they send this to all the institutions. The Committee of the Regions, they publish their opinion with the local and regional perspective, and the European European Economic and Social Committee also published their opinion. Here the SCOs are not mentioned, but the European Economic and Social Committee represents the trade unions, the employers' associations, and also the social entities. So this is your natural space, as I said, for your presentation. And what I say regarding the Parliament is also valid for the EESC. You need to send to the representatives of the entities that are there, you need to send them your opinions so that they can include them in their reports. And in parallel, there are conferences that are organized online or in-person conferences, and you can also suggest your participation. And once a year there is a forum on the civil society. It lasts for 1 or 2 days, and you can afford that. You can come to Brussels and you can take part in this forum, because there you will be aware of all these aspects that we mentioned here, and you will see how the European civil society can act to define and to contribute to these initiatives. Today, there is the last plenary session of the current mandate at the EECS. Starting from October, we'll have a new mandate, and the president will be one representative of the group of the civil society, and he is a representative that we met in our last visit. His name is Seamus Bolland, and he represents an Irish entity, and he will center his activity on the participation of the civil society in the definition of the European policies. So this will be a mandate that's going to be favorable to the civil society. And just to finish, I'd like to say that well, I'd like to recap. We said that the action plan of the pillar will be presented by the end of the year. The public consultation process ended last week, but now the legislative procedure starts. So when the Commission will present this document, please have a good read of it and start thinking about visiting the Commission, the Parliament, etc. Then there is also a strategy for supporting civil society, and this will be also presented by the Commission by the end of the year, so you need to stay tuned to that, and you need to go and meet all the people that you need. And then now you can already start with 2 documents for which the consultation process is still open, which is the future strategy against poverty and the future housing plan. The EU housing plan will be presented by the start of 2026, but the housing plan and the strategy against poverty, well, the consultation period is open until the mid-October. So you can contribute already to these documents. And so you can have your say. I'll stop here. Okay, thank you, Anna. Well, it looks like we can shine some light in this darkness. Alfonso, as a European network, as a generator alliances with your expertise in social services, we really would like to know your opinion regarding this new financial framework. I guess that you have a lot to say regarding the guarantee of the social rights at the national and also regional level. Anna mentioned many of the tools that we have that may allow us to have this impact on what's happening in Europe. So do you think that there are shared strategies with third sector entities, and how can we build this network of networks to promote these issues? Okay, thank you. First, thanks to the organizers for organizing this session, because I believe that this is a very timely moment, because the Commission presented in July this new framework. So as you said, we are a network of public administrations in the field of social services. And obviously, as a network, as Anna said, we try to make the voice of our members heard in the field of social services. Many things have been said, so I'll try and not repeat what has been said. But I think that first we need to say that what the Commission has done is a proposal. The Commission is obliged to present proposals, and later, as you have here on the slide, later the national governments and also the European Parliament need to talk about that. And so, apart from these advisory boards, I believe that the European Parliament has a very important role, because MPs represent their voters in the regions or the local authorities where they come from. So I believe that the members of the European Parliament may have a very important role. Now, this is a very complex issue, and sometimes it's difficult for us to learn things. Now, regarding this framework and regarding the pillar of the social services transformation, I believe that we cannot forget that this moment is extremely complex, because we have armed conflicts, and it is important to note that the proposal suggests to include funds for the application of the social plan. And as Jorge said before, now the principles are somewhere, because up until now it was difficult to find these 20 principles that he mentioned. The European pillar of social services is not a legislative document in itself. So we have different principles and different regulations. There are mainly communications by the European Commission, and we will need to see what's the final proposal after the consultation process that finished last week. And I'll share with you what we suggest as a network representing the public social services. I believe that from the social point of view, the link to this pillar is very important, because this comes at a time where the European Commission is suggesting for the first time to have a European strategy against poverty. The strategy 2020 from 2010 already included the reducing the risk of exclusion for 20 million people. This never materialized, because now they are considering to reduce poverty by 2050. But the poverty will never be reduced in 5-10 years, because we are living in a very complex scenario, and we need very long-term measures. And actually, the exclusion was not reduced, but actually it increased. So it is very important to consider also cooperation plans with the public administrations. That's very important for the governments. And the Recovery and Resilience Plan went from the multilaterality, which was guiding the co-governance model at the European level. We moved from there to a bilaterality. So now the European Commission directly with the member states. And then the member states have the responsibilities, as it was the case here in Spain. They have the responsibility of managing with the regional institutions and the local authorities the implementation of these funds. At least 14% of the investments need to be allocated to the principles of the social pillar of social rights. And this is already orienting to where these investments need to be heading. Many things have been implemented now, but 25% needs to be implemented in the current pluriannual framework. In the government's chapter, this new budget suggests to include the national budgets, but also the regional budgets. That's important, because now they are talking about national and regional plans. And that's important because, in my opinion, it opens up the door to the possibility that these plans are not just national but also regional. So they can include everything that exists already. For example, in Spain, we know that we have our national plans that are managed by the national authorities at 50%. The social has to be presented and considered as an independent fund. We thought that this would be diluted among amongst all the existing funds. So the fact of proposing the European Social Fund as an independent fund is a very important step, because now we can defend it. So it is very important for us to have this. And there are several doors, and if we need to prioritize one, I would prioritize the door of the MPs, because they now have a very important role if they really want to defend social policies. So the European Social Fund needs to be really an independent and a strong fund that is really part of this co-governance between the European institutions, the national institutions, and the regional ones. Most of our members come from the local and regional members, but I believe that the national administrations play an essential role. We cannot forget that at the European level, we talk about the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality, and I believe that national administrations have an essential role, which is the role of coordinating and also the role of legislating, but they have this very important role of coordinating. So in the social field, the coordination is essential. The regions in Spain, for example, have full competencies in the field of the social services, but it does not mean that the national government does not have this very important coordinating role. To us, the fact of this European Social Fund being an independent fund is very important, because this gives us a crucial window of opportunity for it to become a very solid fund. It has to be linked also to the application of the action plan of the pillar. That's also very important. But as I said, the moment is very timely, and it has to be linked to what has been done in the resilience framework. In Spain, we have made a lot of progress in the new model of the social services, the care model, the care economy. I believe that we have the opportunity now to use all this knowledge and to go beyond it and to apply it in the new framework. In the co-governance field, it is very important to highlight that we are talking about indirect funding from the EU through the European Social Fund, but we are also talking about direct funding. There are other funds that can promote the development of these social services. They suggest a 50% increase for the Erasmus Plus program and also for the Competitiveness Fund, including the program Horizon Europe. And we have been asking for years now to include also social services and also the research in the field of social services and also innovation in the field of social services. So there are also funds from the EU for employment through funds such as Interreg, FEDER, but there are also direct fundings through the CERF, the Social Innovation Fund, to test innovative solutions in the social services field, to foster the knowledge exchange, to develop the capacities, the good practices, and also testing solutions to improve access to social services. Conchita mentioned something which is very important. Programs such as Erasmus Plus are essential to contribute to the development of the education of our staff. It is very important to design programs also for the social services managers and implementers. People working in this field need to benefit from these trainings so that we can have this co-creation with the users also. And finally, the European Social Fund has to help the most vulnerable people. And we hope that we will still have these tools in the future. Now to finish. The European funds help local, regional and national administrations to test innovative solutions in the social field. And they also help implement what's done at the national level. So these funds aren't there to really cover what does not exist at the national level. So, the European funds are not there to replace the national obligations at the national level, at all levels. That's very important. I would like to finish my first contribution with a proposal for the director of the Taula. We've mentioned many times the co-governance of the funds, and we've mentioned the need for the regions to have a role, a bigger role. I agree with that, but we also know that in the implementation of the European Social Fund, there has to be a reprogramming in almost all the frameworks. Why? Because the administrations are incapable of managing and of implementing the funds. That's the situation. So I believe that it would be interesting sending this question through the transparency portal to understand how they have used the European funds for social inclusion, and from there try and see how they can send evidence-based proposals. Because I believe that it is very positive for the regional administrations to have a bigger role, but for that they also need to strengthen their implementation capacity. Because if it is suggested to invest 25% to social inclusion, well, is that the reality? I think that most of the European Social Fund is allocated to active employment policies. We know that sometimes they are not so necessary, so that's something important that we need to consider.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Alfonso. We will go back with homework to do, and we're delighted for you to give us this homework to do. That's why we are here to share thoughts. And now, Barbara, we move on to the third social sector to hear from your perspective based on human rights. So, from your perspective, from the third social sector, considering how it's linked to human rights, we'd like to know whether there are some unanswered questions, whether there are any concerns, overflowing concerns, and of course, if you'd like to share your opinion with regards to the intervention that we've had so far, that would be great. Well, many things have been said already. We've already brought up many points, and I think I would like to, as Alfonso was saying, in order to avoid repeating what has already been said, I'd like to zoom out a little bit. We've been focusing a lot on funding, the financial framework, but we mustn't forget what is underlying this financial framework and what its purpose is. As the regional minister said, the financial framework is a tool. It's a tool that should allow us to deploy public policies, and public policies are linked to a series of regulations. The European Union, at the end of the day, is an international actor. It's a subject of international law. It's an international integration organization. That's how it would be defined. And it's, as a subject, it has duties and obligations. When, as we said before, the European social rights pillar is based on 20 principles, but these principles, it's not that they're not binding, but they are principles that stem from international human rights regulations, and the European Union, as an actor and a subject of international law, has the duty to work based on this legal framework that exists. They have an obligation and a responsibility. So yes, it's true that in previous financial frameworks it wasn't established that the social European pillar was something to be deployed. It's not something that's down to goodwill. It seems as if it's something up to goodwill, but it's not goodwill. It's a duty of the European Union, and the purpose of this organization is very often becomes blurry when we talk of a single market and a leadership focusing on developing the single market. We tend to forget about the duty to promote and protect the rights of European citizens. But it must be clear to all of us that it's essential and that it's in one of the components that should be worked on. It's not down to goodwill. So based on this, we must also understand that member states must also contribute. So I think this proposal, and I like looking at it from this perspective, because based on what we've heard, we have many opportunities to participate, but we must be strategic in how we want to focus our participation. Also in this financial framework, as we've seen, the funds allocated to border management have been tripled. It's no longer talking about migration policy, but border management. So if we're talking about border management, we must go back and revisit how the EU is building the financial framework. It's not being focused on human rights, but on defense, protection, and single market. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that we, as a third social sector, and I think I'm talking on behalf of all the third social sector, we are very much concerned by this approach. This is an approach that will develop and have an impact on all other aspects from of these 20 principles of the European social pillar. So we must be strategic when defining the narrative, and we have to build this narrative firstly with a clear human rights approach. We're worried about how we can have an impact, but we also must be clear on what we want to have an impact on and how we want to have an impact. So we need to have a human rights approach that brings us a much more precise discourse linked to a series of obligations. It's not about goodwill. There are some duties that have to be respected. We must also highlight the trend and say that we are concerned that in developing this financial framework, maybe they haven't structured it under a human rights-based approach, and therefore all of these strategy and all of these operational plans and partnership plans won't have a human rights approach. If we don't include the human rights-based approach from the start, it'll be difficult to bring it on at a later stage. So we need to make the most of these spaces of participation. I agree that the European Parliament is one of the key stakeholders here, because it's in the European Parliament where we must go to convince our MEPs on an equal standing, saying you have a series of duties within the European law, the treaties of the European Union, but you have a larger umbrella, which is international law, and under international law you don't operate in an isolated way. We have a much bigger one, international public law, international human rights law, which in the EU treaty, in the functioning treaty of the EU, there is a specific mention, and it is clearly stated that the EU will work for a human rights-based approach and for the implementation of human rights in member states. So this financial framework cannot work turning a blind eye to this, and despite all of the speeches we're hearing, there's no mention to human rights, and they refer to protection, to defense, to developing the single market, to innovation, to competitiveness. But why are we doing all of this? What are we talking about? We're talking about rights-based legal obligations, and when they say that entities must implement the European framework, well, yes, but to a certain extent, otherwise we'll be far from our citizens. And there's also another big threat, and that is misinformation and hate speech, where everything gets mixed and we have to protect ourselves. Sometimes protection isn't detached from human rights, but we need to have a clear understanding on human rights, and we have a series of tools and developments in human rights, which is important. So, and third sector entities, out of survival, I'd say we are by nature creative and innovative, and if we're not innovative and creative, we lag behind. Because of this, we have learned many things already. And here I strongly agree with Alfonso when he says, well, maybe we should build together. We're a fundamental player, and we must take pride in this, and we must work and talk as such. We have a discourse. We represent the voice of civil society, which is very often absent, so we can act as a loudspeaker for these people. And of course, we need to work together. I also believe, and I'll summarize this in one sentence, I believe that we need global strategies, but we're offering local responses, and that is why I say that regionalism makes sense. We cannot, not all of us are living in the same situation. We don't all live in the same context. We don't all have the same needs. As someone said before, Jorge was saying that there's 20% for digital policy. So regardless of whether we want to, 20% has to be invested in digital policies. Well, maybe not everyone has the needs, and the diversity comes with it. Well, then I don't want to extend myself any further. Yes, we will quickly move on now because we are short for time. We won't open the floor to the audience, but I want to pose a challenge to the people on this roundtable. If anyone has any concerns with regards to this uncertain future of the European Union, I'll just summarize what we said. Catalonia is faced with challenges that don't have an answer. Housing challenges, poverty, child poverty, the third sector, which is forced to innovate. We have a financial framework that is suggesting reformulating programs, but we also have advocacy opportunities. We have a social rights pillar, which is out there, and we need to look at how we can develop it. To wrap up this roundtable, what are the important takeaways? And Alfonso, Barbara. Well, firstly, I'd say that funding is one part, true. But for instance, when it comes to the European social pillar and the 20 principles and the plan of action will include concrete initiatives. And I think that is where we should do advocacy based on each initiative, the poverty strategy, the partnership plan, which can include important things, and funding is a part of that. But it's, as we said throughout this morning, it won't solve the issues of poverty nor housing, but we must try to have a European legislative framework that is adequate enough so that the different administrations can act to face these challenges. And yes, I just end by saying that poverty and housing are two big challenges here in Catalonia, and we already have a first opportunity in the coming months to start acting aligned with what Barbara was saying. And I think, for instance, that when talking of the European Social Fund, we must reclaim that it has a territorial approach that is based on deep knowledge of the local and regional realities, because only then can we come up with effective responses. So when talking about funding, I'd stress this, and when it comes to legislative deployment and the plan of action, I would stress that we must not miss out on any opportunity, even if it seems a small opportunity. As Barbara and Alfonso said, we must knock on the doors of the European Parliament. And it's the idea that Barbara said, we need to take an active lead. Very often when we go to Brussels, we think, oh, we're going there to ask for something. But no, we are stakeholders. We have to participate in defining and deploying the policies, and we must must know that whoever we meet in Brussels, whether they are MEPs or civil servants, very often because they're in Brussels, they're far from our realities. So very often when we go to speak to them, we're doing them a favor, because we can say, say, hey, listen, in Catalonia we're faced with this problem. And maybe someone who's working on the poverty strategy in the European Commission is totally unfamiliar with our reality or with innovative solutions that you're already implementing. And the fact that you convey this to them helps them change their work. We have to change our mindset and truly believe that we are valid stakeholders and we are not just going to Brussels to ask for anything. We are part of the solution. Thank you, Alfonso. Well, I think that in the third social sector, the fundamental challenge, globally speaking, is being able to defend social inclusion as the #1 priority for all entities and organizations and administrations working in the field of public social policies. What happened is that today, as I said before, a series of consensus that have been around for some years are no longer necessarily there, and that is why I think the social sector must be clear that the goal should be the social inclusion of all people, and at the same time we need to remain open to developing the necessary evidence to have the arguments to defend social policies, especially when talking with those who are not convinced that this should be the case. Those who work in the social sector should be convinced of the need. The challenge here is to convince those who aren't convinced. And for that, we must remain open to say, okay, let's generate the necessary evidence to guarantee that we have the arguments to defend the need for social policies. I think it's essential in our sector in order to come up with these arguments that will allow access to the necessary funds so that these public policies fulfill their goal, which is clear, and that is to promote and guarantee social inclusion of all people in our communities. Thank you. Barbara. I very much agree with what has been said, and there's another part which is very important, and that is that when we define our narrative, our story, and that what we are fighting for, based on a human rights approach, as I said before, I think it'll be very important that when using all of these spaces of participation, we must be focused on putting people at the center. Very often, we talk of people as if they were some alien beings, but when we're talking of inclusion, we are talking of people. And when we talk of people, we must adopt a comprehensive approach and an intersectional approach. So when we build our narratives and when we want to have a say in plans of action and in the financial framework, in developing the partnership plans, which will be very important in the regional perspective, I fully agree that the responses will be different for different places. So I think we must have a clear, concrete discourse based on human rights, putting people at the center, especially to carry the voice of those who are excluded. And all of these framework we are building and all of these policies must serve to find solutions to the situations these people are living in, to bring down the barriers to inclusion. Very often we come up with an immediate response, but we forget about what is the underlying cause of vulnerability. So we have to start off by relieving, if not eliminating, these barriers and to facilitate equal opportunities. We want to live in a society with equal opportunities where human rights are respected and where we can all access our rights. Thank you so much. Thank you so much also to all three of you for your interventions. As usual, we would have loved to have more time, and I would have loved to be given the floor to our audience. Now we'll move on to our coffee break. We're pressed for time, so please grab a coffee and come back into the room. And just remind you all that the next roundtable will be in English, so if you need an interpretation device, please do not forget to get one. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed your coffee break. There are more spaces up here in the middle if you want to come to the second row. as you prefer. During the coffee break, some people have left, and so thank you once again for staying with us for the second part of this morning.
Some speakers from around Europe in this second roundtable. It's been an intense morning. I hope you have been able to frame and contextualize the reality here in Catalonia, to find opportunities and some first collaboration ideas with the different networks within the European Union, advocacy opportunities as well, and also all the picture that Jorge Núñez offered us. We will now start the second roundtable, which is entitled Territorial Proposals to Improve the Governance and Impact of European funds. So please, let's do a warm welcome to Albert Bauló, Head of Project Management and Digital Transformation at Pere Tarrés Foundation, Mrs. Liva Svarce, Project Manager of the Social Entrepreneurship Association of Latvia, welcome, Mrs. Carla Ventura, Vice President of Cooperativa Antonio Sergio para la Economía Social, CAGES, de Portugal, welcome, and Ms. Francesca Lupi, Researcher and Project Manager of the Europe Program at the Barcelona Center of International Affairs. Welcome, Francesca, as well. So we have two main objectives for this roundtable. The first one is to land the concepts and ideas that we have been discussing during all the morning, talking about projects, talking about advocacy, talking about governance and opportunities, but from the ground. We were starting this this event today saying that Brussels is not something that is super far away. Brussels influences us. Brussels really changed lives. So now we will also show how through your projects, how through your ideas, your investigations, we can also actually do this change. Okay. So let's start with a quick presentation of each of you and a presentation of some project or some initiative or some kind of governance that has helped your territory. Albert, benvingut. Si us plau,
So Albert, please, if you could tell us a little bit about Equida and how the Equida project led by Pere Tarrés Foundation was funded and what it's about and what impact it may have also on the ground. Hi, I'm Albert Bauló. I'm responsible for the project management area and digital transformation in the Pere Tarrés Foundation. Can you hear me now? Yes, good. So we were one of the lucky ones, we could say, because we were able to benefit from the next generation funds. Let me tell you a bit about the Equida project. I mean, we've talked about many things this morning. Equida project is mainly focusing on carers. And the project behind this idea was to improve the quality of life of carers by offering them support either from the administration or from any other entity that could support carers. So the goal is to improve the quality of life of caregivers. So, as we said, it's a project that, of course, is aligned with everything we've mentioned about social rights, the European Union. But in our everyday life is where there are challenges. Let me tell you more about this project. It's a online platform, a mobile app, where caregivers, non-professional caregivers, can enjoy content such as tutorials, guides, videos, useful information and tips. So we could say it's an information hub that can then redirect users to contact different administrations and organizations. and to have access to all of these contents. So the content published in the app, contents that maybe are provided by other organizations or by public administrations. We call it a managing entity. It could be the City Council of Mataró, a provincial council of Barcelona, or it could be an association, or we as a foundation can post our contents on this app so that these caregivers, non-professional caregivers, can gain an improved quality of life. So let me go to the key point behind all of this. The key element is to find alliances with different managing entities, because they are the ones that will be feeding the content onto the app. The first question they ask us is, how long is this project going to last? Will it be only this year? Will it have any continuity in the future? So we, as the people who have been appointed by the regional government to develop this tool, is one role. And secondly, if these organizations and entities have to invest in teams to generate contents, well, this will require having they ask us whether they have to make a short-term investment or a long-term investment. How long will this last? Of course, from the Fundación para Tarrés, we would like this app to continue in time. It's a very useful application. It's being valued positively by caregivers. So very often they say, wow, the idea is great. We'd like to participate. We want to get started. But how much longer will we be able to benefit for the next generation funds? Will the project continue? Won't it? Of course, we will continue. There are city councils, for instance, that have asked us whether they should set aside resources for next year or whether the project will only run during this year. So having a guarantee that a project that is strategic, at least for those who care for other people, it's important for it to have continuity in time. And we think that maybe we, as the people developing this platform, said, well, we must give it a continuity, but I can only respond for my part of the affair. I don't know if others will want to continue supporting a platform which in theory seems great, but it's funded by next generation funds that will come to an end this year. So this is a bit the situation we find ourselves in. Yes, we all have signed 4 agreements with city councils and organizations. We have more than 700 people, non-professional caregivers, who have signed up to the app. So it's alive. The content's being published constantly. When we've gone out and reached out to city councils, they say, wow, this is a great tool because it can contribute to bring an added value to my Department of Social Services in a city council. But of course, the same city council say, how long will this project last? Will it continue after the next generation funds are over? Should I set up a team dedicated to this? Should I dedicate funds to it? Of course, creating content requires teams and effort and people. So that is the point we're at with this project, where everyone likes the app, would like to give it continuity, but we'll have to reach a point where we decide whether we continue ahead with it or not. So that was the challenge we're facing now. The challenge I wanted to share with you. Thank you. That's really interesting. You mentioned some key elements, alliances, and the nature behind these alliances. You look for allies, but what does it mean? Maybe allies can help search for funds, or within all of the possibilities of doing advocacy. Can you collaborate with alliances or not? Are they open to collaborating or not? And then there's also the fact that you're taking care of a project which offers a great potential in terms of knowledge transfer. So maybe here you could explore the availability of other funds. Generating alliances for you, do you see this as an opportunity, as we said in previous debates? Yes, of course. Equida was born as a tool that was meant to help social services to bring together and share information between healthcare providers and social services. It's an app that allows to combine this information from healthcare and social services. But of course, you need a strong commitment for this to work. If the project has a shorter or longer lifespan, depending on the funding, well, it's important when you define alliances. You need allies in the mid to long term. You can't set up a short-term alliance. It's not as simple as saying, okay, let's sign an agreement and so that this service has enough contents that I can offer my citizens in my towns. That's not enough. We must also bear in mind, at least when talking of Catalonia, there are many municipalities, many city councils that cannot generate content to support the group of non-professional caregivers. So it's important to build alliances between those organizations that offer services to non-professional caregivers and also the administrations to centralize this information hub that is useful for caregivers, and it should be available to all. Thank you, Albert. I'm sure we'll go into some of these details later.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here today. So can you please just quickly explain us which European funds does your organization use? How are you using this? How do you see all the questions and proposal opportunities, challenges that we have talked about today? And what is your vision about this multi-annual financial framework?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to participate in such a discussion. Also in Latvia, we started these discussions a week or a week and a half ago. We already had the first conference, really seeing what has been proposed and what do we think about that. Yeah. But maybe before I start telling you of what we do and what funds we use and what would be our propositions, I could give you like a little context of where I'm coming from, because it's probably very different from what is here. So I'm coming from Latvia, which is like a very small country in northeastern part of Europe, and we have less than 2 million inhabitants, so you can imagine the context already. And I guess I don't have to tell you who is our big friendly neighbor. Yeah, just to give you perspective, my hometown is around 70 kilometers away from the border of Russia. So we have had a very complicated history and relations since forever. So we regained independence in 1991. So it means that around 30 years we are trying to build up the country, to build up the welfare system, to build up the civic society movement. So it's not a lot, right, in comparison, for example, with the Western European countries. And yeah, so the civic society movement and social economy is a very new concept in Latvia. And now, on top of everything else, on top of all the other challenges, we are highly affected by the war in Ukraine. And it's not only because geographically we are located not too far away, but also because we understand them historically. We have been there. It has happened to us as well. But also because we are an external border of EU. So we are at the front line. So what we are talking a lot about now is the integrity of the whole society, of the resilience of the communities living at the border regions. So that's something we have been stressing when we deal with, when we talk about social entrepreneurship and social economy in general. And so the story of social entrepreneurship, the development of it in our country is really closely connected to the EU funds. Because in 2015, the Ministry of Welfare received an ESF, started an ESF project, support for social entrepreneurship, and that actually laid the foundation of the development of this field. They were working on the support system in general, and in 2018 we had a law created for social enterprises, which is really one of the big achievements, I think, because I was talking that we are one of the few countries that have a specific law, which gives the definition of what is social enterprise, what support they can receive, how they can collaborate with public institutions, and so on. It also provides the grants for social enterprises, so the new social enterprises started to work and benefiting from these grants, and of course just building the public awareness about social entrepreneurship in general. And it was also the time when the organization I'm working in, Social Entrepreneurship Association of Latvia, was created. So this November we will celebrate 10 years anniversary of the organization. And we are now, we now have around 140 members. So those are social enterprises, NGOs, civic society organizations, and those who just want to support this field and are interested in the field. And we are an NGO that works only relying on the EU, different EU financing instruments and the EU budget. And what we have done during this 10 years is we are developing the ecosystem of social entrepreneurship nationally, but also we are paying a big emphasis to the regions. And as already I was telling you, we really need to make sure that the communities are taken into account, that their voice, that we hear their voice, that they are strong, and that we know what they feel and what they think. Here, I also wanted to stress that we are working with advocacy, which is very often like a voluntary job on top, because it's not really funded in most of the projects. So this is something organizations like us, we have to do, just so that we can bring these voices and make them heard. But this is one of the things that is very hard for different NGOs in Latvia, to work on advocacy, because it takes a lot of capacity and resources. We are working a lot also with the public sector, with municipalities. So, for example, now there are 6 pilot municipalities that are creating a plan how to develop social entrepreneurship in their municipalities. And it's a constant work, because people are changing a lot in municipalities, so we have to explain them again and again who we are, what we want, why it is important for them. But slowly, like the idea and the impression of social economy becomes more clearer. We are also working with education, so social entrepreneurship in education and how we can build it. We have created several materials for teachers so that they can use it in their classes, and also like an interactive game where young people can try and create their social enterprise and respond to the social problems. We are also going to schools and universities and non-formal education institutions to bring this knowledge and tell them about the good experience stories. And last but not least, we are also building the capacity of social entrepreneurs, so providing them with training opportunities on different subjects so that they would be able to scale their social impact. And all of this is thanks to EU funding and different kind of programs where we try to find and cluster of our priorities. And then if we look at this new MFF, we are thinking that we need more clarity of which kind of funding and where it comes to social initiatives. And we need to make sure that the actors themselves receive this funding, because very often I think it might go to some blurry strategies and things like that, but the actors themselves who actually bring the impact to the ground, those are the ones who will not receive. The other worry is that the smaller NGOs or smaller actors will not be able to participate and receive this funding just because those will be bigger funds to apply to. And in Latvia, social enterprises and NGOs are very often very small entities. Those are like 1-2 people organizations plus attracting some volunteers. So yeah, yeah, this is a problematic thing. And then again, when we talk about the result-oriented measurement of the EU funds, sounds great. We don't want to make paper just for the sake. But again, we have to think about how we measure social impact. Will it be apparent right away, like just when we finish the project so that we can prove and get the financing? Or it's sometimes a very long term, it's not easy to quantify it actually. So these were like few thoughts that we already discussed and had, but I think we have done like a great job last 10 years, and we are still hopeful for the next period and to continue the same type of job.
Yeah, this was super interesting. Thank you very much, Liva. You mentioned, and it also links. I will try to, circulate my ideas, sorry. But regarding your proximity to Russia, and I think this can be linked as well on the human rights perspective we were mentioning before of the policies too, right? If we don't have a message based on human rights on the policies, crafting all this, also the financiation or the financing, it won't be possible to give the support to the people that really deserve or need this support, right? So this human rights perspective, I think it's key. Also, the diversity in Europe. We are used to talk about Western Europe, and Europe, we used to imagine few countries, right, located there, but there is a lot of things, a lot is happening also in the Eastern Europe, and it also links on what Mr. Núñez said. We cannot, divide everything, and Barbara also mentioned, no? The same way for everyone, we have different things. You also mentioned a really interesting thing, and it's the type of European Union we want to create, and we want to craft, and we want to develop, right? And this is also really, really interesting. You talk about impact, and also about these different kind of organizations, and we come back to the alliances, maybe, because maybe everything is inviting in kind of, organizing in bigger clusters of organizations, and I don't know if this is something you have been thinking about, like in order to make these funds arrive to these organizations you mentioned are smaller, maybe. This is a possibility, like doing something, a multi-level organizations, and we will talk about this with Carla as well, like federations or confederations of organizations in Latvia. Do you see this possible or as an opportunity?
It is definitely an opportunity. Again, culturally, we come from the situation where we, in the northern part of Europe, we like to be individuals and stay like alone, and that's why we are very jealous of all the cooperatives you have here in the southern part of Europe, and we say that we need to more work together because we are too small to be working individually on different issues. And in general, the alliances, it starts to be a way to work, because we, for example, also our organization, it's a member organization. We unite our members, and with the work that we are doing, for example, the members can influence the policies. So we bring the members together, we raise some issues, and we want their opinion. So, because we ourselves, we don't know what social entrepreneurs need. We ask them directly, and then we can bring this to the Ministry of Welfare and see how far we can get there. The same, because social entrepreneurship is a horizontal kind of priority or like a field, we go to so many different thematic areas like education, social services, and so on. And in each of this, we need to have kind of like a working groups or a bigger alliance that can help us. So we work closely with the NGO organization representing the Civic Society of Alliance, representing all the smaller organizations, and we try to have the bigger say in a group.
Amazing, thank you, Liva. Welcome, Carla, as well, bienvenida. So can you, from CAGES, can you also explain us how are you dealing with these alliances? How are you representing this? How are you doing this advocacy we were mentioning? And what is your model of, how are you reaching all the administrations in order to change things, to make things happen as well?
Bueno, Antes de más, buenos días a todos. Gracias por invitar a
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us here. I come from Portugal. In the US, they believe that's part of Spain, but it's not. We are a country, Portugal. And I'll start by giving you the context of how we work. I will introduce gases, and I'll mention some projects that also are quite aligned to what has been said. Sorry for my Spanish. And so that's what I'll try and do. Now, gases is a public interest cooperative. This is a legal figure that does not exist in other countries. So it exists in Portugal, in France, and in some other countries. And what is that public interest cooperative? Well, it's a cooperative that has competencies given by the state. So we work with the state. I mean, we have in our organization the state and also the federation's representative of the social sector. In Portugal, we have also the third sector. We have two big subsectors, the market subsector, when we have agricultural cooperatives. I will not go into details, but and then we have the non-lucrative subsector. And in our meetings, we have been designed by the governments, and we have also representatives of the other sectors. And in our General Assembly, we also have the representative of the state, which now is the representative of the Ministry of Employment, and we also have the different federations of the social economy in Portugal. So this is an alliance by itself. We have a dialogue platform. That's why we can easily understand what's necessary. And we can see in detail what do we need to really make some pressure upon the politicians that adopt the social policies. In CASES, we also have some voluntary workers. In Portugal, 80% of all the voluntary work is done through social economy entities. So we try and promote citizenship, and we have democratic systems. That's quite good. Then we also have a solid institutional framework, the Portuguese Confederation of Social Economy, and then a council that you also have here in Spain, because the government needs to consult when it comes to matters linked to the social economy. When it comes to housing or taxes, they are not obliged to, but they are obliged to have these consultations when it comes to social issues. And as Liva said, we need to intervene in many sectors. Sometimes we are requested to give our opinion in this social economy field. We have several projects. I'm going to highlight two. The satellite account, and then we also invest in training. Why am I mentioning the satellite account? Well, because here we've said that we need evidences about our value. We need data. And as French people say, without data, there aren't any policies. So that's what we need to have. We've had this satellite account for 4 years, and next year we'll publish the 5th edition. And our methodology is a modular one. So we can always compare different social economy modules. And this allows us to talk to the decision makers. So, for example, here the sector creates 6% of the paid jobs in our country, and the non-profit sector creates 3.7%. It accounts for 3.7% of the country. And here, for example, that's the weight of the social solidarity entities. It's huge in an empty country such as ours. And these organizations are the anchor in crisis situation. So we need to see how our sector operates during the crisis times. So we have this crisis, so COVID, the war in Ukraine, and as you also had here, the subprime crisis. In Portugal, we suffered a lot. It was really harsh. And so we are able to show what happened with the solidarity economy during this crisis. We haven't destroyed any employments, but we have created employment, and we have created more organizations. And during this crisis times, we were able to maintain the investments in the more vulnerable territories. That's why I'm saying that data are necessary to create evidences regarding our value, because the value of our sector is really obvious, but most of the time we are preaching to people who already believe in us, and we need to preach for other people beyond them. So we are calling for the creation of a database. I hope that next year we'll have a database of social economy entities to have all this data available. And then also training. The training is very important. In Portugal, we've created some years ago a training center specific for social economy that offers specific trainings for the different families, and this is also the result of a public and private partnership. So we have the state, the social economy, the social sector, and so they have partnered to offer these trainings. And we also have another program with other cross-sectoral measurement indicators. And for the first time this year, we'll launch a training offer for the public administrations so that they can really benefit from them, so that they come to our sector, they know our sector, they know our specificities, because oftentimes public administrations are ready to give grants to private companies, and that's it. So we are launching this call, and we are going to organize launch three calls. So we have this alliance. We also have the protocol center. That's also an alliance, and then we have. I need to finish? Okay. We have another specificity, which are the social solidarity institutions. This is only existing in Portugal. This is a statute that we have given to some non-profit organizations. And all the specialized social services in Portugal are delivered through these third sector entities, and they're funded by the state. There is an agreement that every 2 years determines how it's as if it was a virtuous triangle. The state, the institutions, and the families. So the state takes part in that. The institutions offer these services, and families pay according to their budget. That's how it works. And why am I mentioning this? Well, because this provides the organizations with stability for their operation, and this also provides families with stability. And it shows the importance of alliances between the state and the sectors that operate in the field. So, childcare, babysitters, houses or housing for women, everything is provided by the third sector via agreements with the state. Yes, we have a biannual agreement, and it states how much the state will invest, and everything is written down, and then families co-participate, but it brings stability, and it also helps us maintain the teams, the working teams, because sometimes we invest a lot in the teams, but then they change and we lose this technical capacity, and that's even more dangerous in empty territories where there are less technicians. So this brings up more stability, and it improves the operation of the services by these institutions. That's all. Thank you, Carla. Perfect. You said very interesting things, such as the importance of the data management, the training, the empowerment. Congratulations for your Spanish, which is much better than my Portuguese. So thank you so much for your effort. And regarding this governance model with the state, you said there are good points, but also I guess there are challenges when sometimes the state representatives do not agree with your values, but well, that's maybe something for another discussion. And then you also mentioned this very interesting multi-level connection. So you translate the administration language into the organization's language, and this also enables the connection, not just at the state level, but also at the European level. So this is maybe something that will enable the political advocacy in Europe. Yes, because we really need to know this universe if we want to contribute to these policies. As it was said before, there is a mismatch between the needs of the territory and the priorities that are set in Brussels by Europe. We are also Europe, but the priorities don't always match. So we also take part in European networks, in the Declaration of Luxembourg, in socio-economic Europe. We are there, but we never lose sight of our territory. We don't have yet a national strategy for the social economy, but we are working on that. And how are we doing that? Well, we have the support of the European Commission, and we have hired the OECD for the follow-up. And France, Greece, Portugal, Belgium, we're together in that. And in next October, we will have the first discussion groups, and we will invite grassroots organizations so that they design the plan, and they will also take part in the follow-up of the policies that are part of the plan, and we'll see if this works. That's the idea, at least. And we Yes, Francesca is next to me. So our main concern is that things are appropriate. We want to have a happy marriage between European policies and the needs from the territory. And we want to consider really the needs of people working in the field. and we want to create these matching policies. So maybe it won't be always possible, but we want to do it. Portugal is a small country, so it is easy to talk, to gather people. To me, well, that's feasible, and we will continue working on that. Thank you, Carla. Francesca, welcome.
Thank you very much for being here. So we have been hearing a lot of things, no? And from your academic perspective, the main question we would like to address to you is like, how do you feel about everything that you have listened today, also as an expert, no, in European funds and European strategy? Please let us know, how do you feel about this multi-annual financial framework and all the descriptions of the organizations here too?
Sure. So I'm going to speak in English, so Liva is not left alone on the stage. So as you mentioned, I work in CIDOB, so the Barcelona Center for International Affairs, and we are essentially a think tank, which basically places us between policymaking and academia. Me and my colleagues each have our own field of research, so I'm specialized in EU policies, and specifically in the social policies and migration policies. And as a research institution, we also rely on EU funding, specifically on the Horizon funding. Currently, we have 2 or 3 ongoing projects, as the new call has just been released, so we're going to have to apply to the new funding now. One of them focuses on migrant exploitation in the agricultural sector. Another one focuses on creating democratic resilience within the EU and on the eastern neighborhood of the EU. And another one focuses on the impact of regional diplomacy to the EU level. So as you can see, very diverse, because we also have a very interdisciplinary and diverse team, but I think this is one of our strengths because we can then focus on many different things, but also in a different perspective. And of course, we try to take it as researchers from the local to then the EU or international level. So I think this is for us extremely important. We also rely on CERV grants, so the Citizen Equality and Rights Values grants from the EU. And with these ones, we try to create activities where we bring everybody together. We're talking policymakers, we're talking academia, we're talking civil society, to try and address the common problems that we face today and try to create perhaps innovative solution or bring forward ideas that perhaps policymakers have not heard, but in academia are present, so to try to bridge the gap between the challenges that everyone is facing. So from our perspective, obviously the EU is kind of facing an existential crisis at the moment. It's questioning itself how it wants to place itself to the crises that are happening in the world, the Russia-Ukraine war, Trump, the situation in Gaza, and it's not really sure how to do that. And this also reflects internally in terms of the strategy we want to adopt in the coming years. At the end of the day, the MFF determines what the EU strategy will be in the coming almost 10 years. So, you got to follow the money to see where the EU is going to invest. And this is essentially why these discussions are so important right now, because we are in the negotiating stage. So it is key for civil society and other actors to make their voices heard, to see, hey, you haven't included this in the proposal, perhaps it's time you think about this as well. As it was mentioned today, there are a lot of challenges, so I'm not going to talk a lot about the ones that were already mentioned. But definitely a main one is a centralization issue. Of course, there is a risk that regional diplomacies and cities are going to be left behind, because if you're overarching this from the state level to the European Commission, there is a risk that necessities on the ground are not considered, and this is a key issue, because at the end of the day, cities and citizens are going to be the ones impacted by this. And of course, this may also lead to a risk of political competition, both nationally and at the EU level. I'm thinking also with the structure that we have now, this is based, as it was mentioned, sort of on this recovery and resilience facilities of Next Generation EU. And I'm not sure there has been a reflection on how these happened. And I'm thinking of Italy, for example. There was a lot of debates of wanting to reform certain projects that were necessarily perhaps the government's priority, but not the region's priority. And the Commission was not really sure how to deal with this. And so a lot of funds ended up not being used, which is obviously a shame, because it ends up not impacting people's lives. So I think there is a need for reflection at the EU level, to maybe say, well, maybe this can be changed, the structure can be changed to sort of reflect local necessities more. And on top of that, there's also a competition of funds between member states. Spain Spain is not going to have the same social necessities as Poland or Latvia. So on top of the national discussions between regions fighting for competitions and the national governments, it's also going to occur at the Commission level. And this is something that should definitely be considered. And importantly, as I mentioned, the financial framework is going to define the EU strategy for the coming years. The way we see it now is that it is a bit blindsided by what's happening right now. Yes, we're going to invest in competitiveness. We're going to invest in defense. These are all impending issues now. But in 10 years, will this still be necessary? What are we building towards? Social policies are a transversal policy that the EU has dealt with forever and is going to continue dealing with consistently. So it is not necessarily sustainable to just decrease funds because we have other priorities now. It also needs to be reflected in a long-term perspective. I mean, I think it was also mentioned in the first roundtable and in the institutional addresses, but social policies contribute towards defense. They contribute towards competitiveness. And in discussions we're having with policymakers right now, this is not conceived. It's very much like it's either this or that. And I think there really needs to be a key opportunity for civil society to come through, or the tertiary sector, and be like, hey, well, actually, it can be complementary. The two need each other. Let's find a way to make this work. And I think a lot of these discussions and these places are not necessarily taking place. And I think this is great why this debate is happening today, because it's a first step in that direction. We have 2 years to try to influence the financial framework. So let's get to work.
Let's go. Let's rock. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to generate opportunities, as we also mentioned at the beginning of this event. And how do you feel like the academic sector can help us doing this advocacy, creating this social impact, measuring this social impact, maybe also collecting this data, be able to talk as well in the spaces that we were talking about, in the advocacy spaces too, that we can generate. No? How can we work together? You were mentioning this, no? That they're not seeing us. Okay,
Yeah.
What can we do to make them see us?
I think academia is in a special place because obviously it does research, so it talks directly to the people directly involved. It gathers all this local data, but with a more foresight perspective, right? In academia, you consider the history, but also where we're going. So it can bring a more comprehensive perspective as to what's happening on the ground, what the necessities are, the practical things, and then bring it to a higher level. So I think spaces like think tanks, it's great because we can bring people perhaps that are a bit unreachable to other associations and more local associations. So for sure, just I would say starting a conversation, but also all the, like they were mentioning the previous roundtable, of the consultations that EU is organizing, I think are a great opportunity to sort of bring forward proposals and actively advocate for what the necessities are.
And can I add here that we have been using also citizen labs. So going to the citizens and talking to them directly, seeing what they have experienced and what's the impact on them. So getting this first-hand information that could also help to create it.
Yeah.
So also, I think we have, mentioned a lot of things also during this roundtable. Just to conclude and maybe open the mic to the public as well. Just a quick hint about how are you feeling regarding the future. We were mentioning the light, no? This possibility of having a little bit of light. This is just talking. We are, it's paper and it's talking. Now we need action. But how do you feel? Do you feel also what you hear about Catalonia and in the social sector of Catalonia, do you feel that we can find these kind of ways of collaboration also in your countries? And in case of Catalonia, Albert, so maybe do you find that you can find also this way of collaboration with the countries that have been visiting us today? It's just a quick hint. How do you feel? ¿Cómo te sientes, Albert? ¿Cómo has visto?
Sí, ahora
Well, yes, I mean, what Oliver said was right. Data is important. We need to measure things up. So when you have to correlate variables, you have to prove things. You have to show and determine the social impact. And this is really important. What I'm going to say now may seem trivial, but I had a statistics professor who said, a great statistic man is someone who drowned in a river 1 meter deep. And so it's to say that you either present impactful data or you won't find partnerships, or you won't be able to prove what you've done or find support. So it all comes down to proving what we're doing time and time again. For instance, are you gathering data from your app, and do you have some impact indicators with the social impact? The good thing about having a mobile app and web is that you can record data, but there are situations, as Oliva said, when you think, how can I quantify my impact on a certain group or in a certain context, right? That's what's difficult. In our case, it's easy because we work with an app or a web, but it's not always that obvious and easy. Eva, how do you feel about this and everything?
Yeah, I think what has been also said and what I heard also in previous discussions is that we need to invest in people. Like we understood that this is the importance. This is what will help us, and it's it's not spending the money on social services or social issues, but is this investment on how the people will react afterwards. And I think there were a lot of great initiatives started on also social economy, social innovations. So I really hope that this spark kind of got the people's minds, and they will become also more creative, maybe finding different ways how to deal with that, not only relying on some funds, and that could again develop the economy in general in Europe.
Thank you. Carla.
Bueno, Jorge Núñez me ha dejado un poco.
Well, Jorge left me lost, with no hope, hopeless. But in any case, there is a big dehumanization of the economy, and the third sector focuses on people. So there's a mismatch here. But what we must understand is that territories are not businesses or buildings. Territories are made up of people. So we also need to focus and channel the resources and funds on people. What makes up a country isn't a border or a building, it's people. So I think what will bring true resilience and power into countries are people. And which is the economic sector that focuses on people? It's the third sector, the third social third sector. So I think these spaces that allow us to learn of our realities and learn of what is done here is something we can take back with us, and to come up with a discourse that has some common denominators for our voices to be heard and stronger. So despite what Jorge Núñez may have said earlier on this morning, despite what he said this morning, I think we have a beautiful space and a journey ahead. We are all focusing our energies on doing things properly, and I think that if we start proving and showing what we do and that we are good at what we are doing and how we do what we do, I am sure we won't miss out on this opportunity. And through working in partnership and networks is how we'll make it work, not by working individually in silos. And I think that we also need to get to know about how your organizations work and look at how we could establish collaborations. And it's through these gatherings like today's that we can do this. Thank you, Francesca.
Pessimists are well-informed optimists, so there is a bit of space to work there, I guess. I want to reiterate what Barbara was saying, that global strategies have local solutions. So I think this is something that really the EU needs to hear, especially because it's very focused on the strategy that leaves a bit social services and social policies behind. That investment, as I'm just going to reiterate what everyone was saying, that investment in social policies is absolutely necessary. And I think here alliances voices within the tertiary sector, but also civil society, are key to then make the voices heard at perhaps a more supranational level. That it's not always easy. You know, Brussels is very much in the EU bubble, so it's very difficult sometimes to reach regions and citizens. But again, I am optimistic that in these 2 years something can be done. Also, since the world is moving so fast, with the geopolitical changes, perhaps things will also completely change that may change the EU's perspective of approaching the MFF. So not everything is set in stone. I really do think we have still 2 years to change the proposal, or to at least adjust it to make our voices heard. So I'm fairly optimistic, I want to say.
Great.
A bit more positive.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. We will now open the mic to the public, if anyone would like to say something. Yeah, it's late, eh? Okay, so thank you very much for coming. Really, thank you very much for all your ideas. It's been super interesting. And now I will go to the other mic. Yes, thank you. But then you have a stairs there. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yo parlo. Bueno, moltes gràcies.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for everything. Thank you for your interventions, for your speeches. Thanks to our guests. And to wrap up today, I'd like to invite Ms. Marta Cid Pañella, coordinator of the international area and the governing board of the Taula d'Entitats del Tercer Sector Social de Catalunya, to join me up on stage. Well, I don't know if to start off by wishing you a nice day or good morning. Anyway, in any case, I hope you've enjoyed this morning with us. I'd also like to thank the institutional representatives, the representatives from institutions, entities, organizations, for being with us. And linking it to what Xavier was saying this morning, I'd like to start these concluding remarks by thanking Catalunya Internacional, with whom we have co-organized this debate. Thank you also to the Catalan Ministry of Social Inclusion and Rights, the Department for European Action, and the City Council, which is essential to have these occasions to exchange. We are saying it's the sixth activity. The next, the one that goes every 7 years, is the multi-annual framework. But precisely when things last for a long time, and today we're talking about a budget or financial framework, well, it's the ideal time to hold these very important discussions because of the impact they may have in the future. And I was telling Jorge that I like talking about the EU's economic architecture, because what's at risk here is that it's not just the funds, but rather those who have managed funds and EU funds and budgets. We know that budgets isn't just fund. It means budget lines, goals, and many other things that are ultimately all political and that are political vision, and I'll quote Delors rather than von der Leyen. The vision that you give to our economic architecture is what will determine 7 years of budgetary implementation, because yes, the situation is extremely complex and volatile. We do talk about our borders, the political context. We read and see about it every day. But we also, at the Taula del Tercer Sector, in our federations, we spend a lot of time talking about the situation of the social groups that we work for. And we are saying that because of this situation, and at this time, they are faced with a situation of extreme vulnerability. And this means we have to reach out to further groups that are falling into vulnerability. When the EU wants to come up with an anti-poverty strategy, we must ask ourselves why. We need to ask ourselves, why is the EU wanting a social housing or affordable housing plan? And for sure, many of the things that Jorge said, I wasn't let down by his ideas. Of course, what he said was worrying for me, but I think it should also encourage us to see that there are people managing the budgetary architecture that have this critical approach in such a necessary space like the EU. So we need to deal with what's for us to do, and wrapping up is means trying to be brief, because we have a lot of information, but also share elements that are useful. And this morning we've heard many useful contributions, and from the Taula del Tercer Sector, I'd like to highlight a few. Those of us who deal with the internationalization efforts at La Taula, to us it's become even clearer today that we are an essential stakeholder, that we must show and exert leadership in a very important situation that is working internally within the Taula del Tercer Sector to allow all of our federations to participate, and this means from a top-down approach, but we also have to do advocacy work. We've heard of advocacy work in general, but there are many different ways of advocacy, and I wanted to mention this because I truly believe that we must fully understand how complex it is to do advocacy. Doing advocacy means that you need to be on top of the information. You can't do advocacy without knowledge. The information, as we've heard today, it's very difficult to gather information and to understand. And once you have this information, you have to design an advocacy plan to know where you can do advocacy. It's not the same giving a public speech than meeting MEPs or meeting members of the Catalan Parliament. We've seen the structure. Anna was kindly reminding us of the structures where we can do advocacy, including through the European networks that we are members of. It's very complex, but for a long time we've been a committed actor. Those who came before me and with our technical team, we will continue looking for spaces to do advocacy, looking at how we can do advocacy, participating to get as much information and to participate in an effective way. Advocacy work is costly, and that is why we also request funds to do this essential role that Catalonia needs so desperately. We must do it. We somehow are responsible for doing advocacy, and those around us need to help us to do it as well as we can. So that is our final goal. I also wanted to thank you all for your useful contributions. There's a big difference between the first roundtable and the last. But at La Taula del Tercer Sector, we must also pay attention to how they're going to implement the European social funds. We'll have to read the small print. We do not know whether they'll ask entities applying for these funds to co-fund the project, and that is something we'll have to be alert to. We'll also have to look at which percentage, how we'll need to justify the funds, and maybe we'll be able to go to Brussels to talk about advocacy, but maybe we'll end up speaking about the real headache of all the bureaucracy involved in applying for these funds. We work close to the ground, and we do not want to give away our competencies. We don't want them to be centralized. We have competencies in the social field in Catalonia, so everything has many levels. And the taula del tercer sector social, I see someone looking at me with a look of fright on their face. We need to find answers to all of these questions. So thank you all very much. I'm convinced that along the process that we've followed today and with what I'm explaining, we will be meeting again very soon, because what's clear is that the only possible response is to collaborate, to have shared working spaces, and to strengthen our networks. That is what we must focus on, and I am convinced that many of you who are here will meet again. So thanks again for being here and for resisting right up until the end. Thank you.